Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the July 25th City of Courtenay regular council meeting. I'd like to just start by recognizing that we are meeting on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land, and we thank them for that. Would just like to make one comment as we do have a heat warning that has come across East Vancouver Island, and just a reminder to people to be very cautious as the heat is rising. And during the heat warning, there's a few things that you can do in the city of Courtenay. We do have the cooling center at the Florence Fieldwork Center conference hall, which is upstairs, and that's between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. while the heat warning is in effect. At Lewis Park, we have the Rotary Water Park, again, some shade with the trees and obviously the water park to cool down. There's the outdoor pool and wading pool. And if you need more information, you can always go to courtenay.ca/rec online or give us a call at our 250-338-5371. And again, just make sure you're planning ahead. You know what the weather is going to be like, and you're bringing plenty of water and sunscreen. With that being said, we'll move into our regular schedule. Introduction of late items. There will be a late item rising report that came from our in-camera meeting. And so I'll bring that up under new business. And other than that, we can move into our regular council minutes from July 11th. And somebody would like to move adoption. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any errors or omissions from our July 11th? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. For those that are watching on YouTube or in the Zoom meeting, we do have Councillor Hillian, who is attending virtually today. So you'll see his hand going up occasionally or not, depending on the votes we're taking. That being said, moving into the City of Courtenay RCMP quarterly statistics report. Okay, that's been moved and seconded, and we'll pass it over to Inspector Mike Kerbers. And Inspector Kerbers, we're just going to bring up the, a little PowerPoint here. Just take a second. All right, and it is over to you.
Thank you, everyone. We can just scroll right to the next page if that's okay. No, this is, oh, there we go. Yeah, okay, my bad. Good day, everyone. Thanks for having me. I don't have a robust presentation like last time when we presented. I have the quarterly report, which I do every quarter. And for those who are unfamiliar, our quarter runs from April to April. And during that period, I do some reporting on the type of file count for the communities. That's sent to Mayor Wells and CEO Jeff Garbat, and then disseminated to the councillors and everyone else because it is public knowledge. So I'll go over the report and kind of go over it, skim over it, and then we can open it up to questions. So a lot of these are basically calls for service. So for this quarter, which is April to end of June, and if you look at the first calls for service graph there, we do it from January to December because that's how the calendar year is. But if you actually look at it, it gives you a comparison. We're actually looking from April 2022 to end of June 2022. And if you're looking for yearly comparisons, you just refer up. So for instance, in June of this year, we've had 1,086 calls for service from anything from domestics to theft from vehicles and minor arguments, neighborhood disputes, anything that comes into our call center that we will respond to. So 1,086 as compared to last year was 1,440. So on each, you can see from last reporting year for April, this year is lower and May is less. And then June again, files are down. So it's 95 fewer calls for service in the Courtenay area from between April and May. Next slide is the traffic files. Again, 60 fewer traffic files. And again, if you look at the reference to, well, back up. There we go. Sorry. There we go. So April, we had 84 files. In May, we had 97. And then in June, 46. which are good numbers. So the trend is going downward for calls for service, which is good for us. Gives us a lot more time to do proactive stuff, engagement with the community, and 10 different functions. Next slide, please. So the break and enter, again, we had one more file in April, which is insignificant. Less in May and then more in June, and I can't attribute why that fluctuates like that. A lot of our stat-driven files are geared by prolific offenders, and we have done a very good job in putting a lot of those individuals in jail. So that kind of drives our stats down, and it's good for the community. Theft from vehicle is the next one. And again, those are down. There's May or April is down. May has gone up a little bit, and June has gone down. On to drug trafficking. So we had 2 in April, 3 in May, and then we went up in June. I want to point out that if you were paying attention to the news, a couple of weeks ago, we took a significant player off the streets here recently, seizing a large cache of drugs and weapons. So that was a 3-month project that worked out very well for us. So that's significant. It alleviates some of the problem, not all of the problem, but it does take away a key player in that world. So violence in relationships has gone down. It's still significant. We deal with that routinely. We have 2 members that are very good. They're part of our domestic violence unit. They do a very good job in keeping on top of this sort of thing. They action things right away, and then they send follow-ups to other officers to make sure all the reporting requirements are done from our end. And the next slide. Sexual assault it's kind of less in April, a little bit more in May, and again, it's a little less. Again, these are investigated by frontline officers and our domestic violence unit, and we take these calls very seriously. We try and deal with them as best we can as they come in. So that's kind of the stats part of it, and just open it up for questions.
All right, thanks very much. And first of all, we have Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for the report. When these are reported, are these all like in terms of domestic assaults and the sexual assaults? Are these all unique parties, or are some of these, several calls to the same, the same couple or that kind of thing? Or are you able to share that? I guess I'm just curious whether there's a lot of repeats going to the same residents within those numbers.
Yes, there is some of that. Typically, when they come into, we come into these investigations, we put some strict reporting rules and conditions on them, and we have curfew checks, and they have conditions that put on them by the courts. So we check on that routinely. We do go to residences and meet with couples that are repeat offenders, if you want to say that.
Yeah, I guess so. It's always difficult, I guess, to really look at the numbers in those situations, because sometimes if the numbers are up, it could be the same.
Yeah, it's the same couple.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So we have some really strict guidelines for those scenarios, and our domestic violence unit follow up with that routinely as our frontline members. We try and keep close reporting requirements. Typically, for a file of that nature, they are a monthly reporting requirements and follow up by us, and 3-month and 6-month. So all the conditions are met, and then we can follow up and make sure everything's good on in that relationship and that investigation.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that answer. And I think one of the things, and you sort of talked about it with those prolific offenders and how a case might take some time, but I think it's always bears repeating, one of the mantras I've heard from yourself and other law enforcement in the community is for people to make sure that they're reporting things that they're seeing, so that the RCMP can respond in a timely fashion. And even if they're not able to respond right away, if it's not a critical situation where somebody's health and safety is at risk, that information can be tracked and help with the files that you guys are working on. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, but I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, no, it is important for us to receive those reports. There might be something in there that we can use later on. It's good for our tracking purposes because there could be just a snippet information on that file that helps us with a file later on down the road. So reporting is important. And I want to kind of repeat that we take files on a priority basis. So that's priority 1, 2, 3, and 4. And 1 and 2 priority files are usually the domestics and assaults, the ones that files that need immediate action. So you're going to get a response from frontline officers. 3s and 4s are going to sit, and you might have to wait 2 or 3 hours to get a response, or maybe longer. But all those reports add up to us solving the problem at the end of the day. We need the information. It helps us. You may not get an answer right away, but someone will be in touch with you and follow up to make sure we got the information correct. And again, we also have the online reporting system. If you don't want to talk to us, or you aren't near a phone or something else, then you can do the online reporting system, and we review those files daily.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And again, just want to really say thanks for a lot of the work that's happened in our community over the past few years. I think the RCMP has worked well with our staff on problem houses and some of the major issues that are going on. And that teamwork seems to be paying back dividends. And we still have challenges, but again, if people are able to keep reporting them so that we can keep on top of them, I think that's going to get us in a better place. So Ken, thanks very much. And I have Councillor Theos.
Yeah, thanks, Inspector Curvers. I'm just wondering, now that the weather's getting a little bit sunny or very sunny and very hot, the bike patrol, there's been some concerns. Citizens have been concerned about just gatherings in areas where maybe they're feeling unsafe because potential savory things happening. But with the bike patrols that might be going out and doing routes such as the Riverway Walkway and whatnot, is that going to be actively occurring during the summertime and beyond?
Oh, absolutely. That's going to stay in place. Our bike unit is well engaged in those areas. I know they work closely with bylaws and Peter and some of the other folks to identify new locations where people gather, and we kind of work our way into those locations and identify people and kind of work within our systems to kind of help people or deal with them accordingly. The bike patrol is going to be there. It's not going anywhere anytime. We're going to be active in those patrols and doing those routes where it's difficult to get to by walking. But yes, the answer to your question is yes, the bike patrol is staying.
Thank you, Inspector Curvers.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And this is probably an appropriate time for me just to mention, you don't have to comment on it, Inspector Curvers, but I've been chatting with Mayor Baird, Leslie Baird from Cumberland for quite some time on the new location or a new RCMP building. And so those discussions are kind of moving forward. There's a committee struck and stuff. So again, probably not going to happen right away, but just so members of council and the community are aware that we are actively engaged in with the province to make sure that we can hopefully make the RCMP even more efficient by allowing them to be a little bit more in one location and do their job as best they can. So yeah, with that, Councillor Hilling. Thank you so much. Off to you.
Mayor. Mayor, I just want to acknowledge Inspector Curvers acknowledged opportunity for the members to participate in other activities of late. And I particularly want to acknowledge our members in Red Surge at both the Canada Day parade and also at the recent pole raising with our Indigenous community down at the air park. And I just want to appreciate the fact that the inspector and his members were there fully taking part in those important community events. Thanks.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And Canada Day was very warm, as was the pole raising, but I think Canada Day might have been a little bit warmer. And so again, to be walking and representing was greatly, greatly appreciated. So thanks for bringing that up, Councillor Helene. And Mr. Inspector Curvers, I think we're done. If you'd like to meander off, you can stay and watch the rest of the meeting if you've got nothing better to do. But again, thanks so much for what you're doing, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me. Take care.
All right. All those in favor of receipt, and that's unanimous. Excellent. And next we have occupational health and safety program. All right. And I'll pass it over to staff.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And through to council, just through our annual reporting, council highlighted some of the great work that we were doing in our occupational health and safety area. And we've asked Ms. Paige Knappman to give us a short overview of what we're doing with respect to our occupational health and safety program. And I think it's really important for us to be reaching back to council on some of this information. So she has a short presentation.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present on the topic of the city's safety performance and in particularly in injury reduction. Now, hopefully I can figure out how to run this from this clicker. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to quickly review some of our WCB information and then get into some of the OHS management system elements that I believe are responsible for helping with our performance. So just quickly, I can see it's going to be hard to read all the slides here, but right now the base premium rate for municipalities in BC, the insurance premium rate that we pay is 2.92% of our assessed payroll. Our assessed payroll right now is somewhere close to $13 million, I believe. So the way I always look at premium rates is for every $100 in salary that we pay $2.92 in insurance, or that's what the average municipality would pay. With our experience rating, which I'll explain in a minute, quickly, I guess, we get a 15% discount, which brings us down to 2.48%. So we had a savings this year alone of $67,000. So we pay, if anyone's curious, $377,000 in insurance premiums for WorkSafe BC. So every little saving that we can get, it's worthwhile for sure. There's a bit of an information there on how they calculate our experience rating, and they look back over a number of years. So this shows 2021 for the rates that we were paying in 2021. They did the calculation in 2020, and they actually looked back over 2019, 18, 17, and weighted them slightly different. And our performance those years are what actually calculates our either a discount or a surcharge in insurance. So there's a slide here I pulled off the WorkSafe BC website that just shows over a number of years. We can kind of forecast ahead because of how far back they look. So if we're forecasting ahead, we can see that we're going to stay down at least 15% and likely stronger than that over the next few years. So our savings will continue to compound. The maximum savings that we can ever get is down to 50%, which very few people ever achieve, but that's where I'd like to get us. There's another slide here that just shows our performance compared to others in all the other municipalities. And it's a little bit hard to read as well, sorry, but the average, it's actually the lost time injury rate for municipalities right now is 4.1. And that's a frequency rate. Ours is actually down. Our frequency rate is actually, lost time frequency rate is 2.9%. So we're doing quite well. Those are all the municipalities on that graph. We're down there, the red dot. The average duration of a lost time injury claim for municipalities is actually, the average is 32 days. On ours are 3 days right now. So we're doing quite well. It's easier for me to look at frequency rates this way. And I've shown it back almost 10 years where we had good data, now all collected since about 2013. And you can see by the graphs, the top line in the graph is actually our recordable injury rate, which is both our medical treatment injuries as well as our lost times. And you can see over the years, we've dropped down quite significantly from 16 per year down to what we're at 5.8 right now, which was better the previous 2 years. It goes up and down quite a bit, but it's pretty steady downward curve. And actually it works out to, we're having an average, if you look back over the past 5 years, or sorry, the first 5 years versus the last 5 years, we're having 59% less injuries than we were before. The lost time injury rate there, the green line on the graph, that's the rest of the municipalities in BC. That's the average, and it's at 4.1 right now. We have very little data to work with, but you can see our line going up and down a bit for lost time injuries, but we're staying below the average, and we have for the last several years, and I sure hope that continues. So the parts of our management system, I think, that have the biggest impact are some of the training that we do with all the different levels in our safety management system. So for managers and directors, when they first come on, they get an orientation into our safety management system and how it all works. They have to take incident investigation training, contractor safety management, some of them, and hazard identification and control or risk assessment. Supervisors take the most training in our safety management system, and they take due diligence, risk assessment, workplace inspection, investigation, and contractor safety management. Josh reps, they take their roles and responsibilities for being on the Joint Health and Safety Committee. They take risk assessment, inspection, investigation, and then various other training that they are made available to them throughout the 2-year cycle. And then workers, they start with a safety orientation, which is just simply an overview of their rights and their responsibilities within the system. And then they take occupational safety training, depending on what position they're in with the city. The risk assessment process, I think, is probably, if I had to pick one element that had the most impact, it would be risk assessment. We do a really good job on this, but it's a really good picture for new managers who are coming on, as well as it's the first thing that WorkSafe BC would look for if there was an investigation into a serious accident. So all the occupations do risk assessments, any occupation with a higher risk level. So pretty much all our field workers would have to do them, as well as bylaw officers, public works, parks, etc. Even, anyone who's got workers who go out into the field essentially, as well as front counter workers, anyone with a level of risk. And what happens is a team sits down and does a risk assessment, and they look at all the job tasks that are done, all the hazards they're exposed to. They actually do a mathematical calculation to calculate the level of risk. Then they put in all the control measures that come into play to reduce the level of risk for our employees and do the calculation again. And then they see if it's acceptable. And if it's not acceptable, then it ends up with an action list. So we have very strong worker involvement in the risk assessments. It's not just done by someone like myself. It's done with the workers themselves that do the work, their supervisor, and then either myself or a joint health and safety rep. The other thing we do really well is incident reporting and investigation. Our IT department has built us a really nice online reporting tool where employees can go on and report everything from hazards to near misses to property damage and injury and illness reports. And that online system ensures that we've got really timely notification. It instantly notifies the supervisor, the manager, and myself. And then we can quickly get involved, and sometimes we have to notify WorkSafe BC, or we have to do an investigation and set up for that right away. So that online reporting is great. Investigation process, that's based on severity level. There's a whole team involved. They do a really good job. We have a standard causation model that we use to make sure everybody looks for root causes, and then we put recommendations to address the root causes. And that's to prevent the same incidents from happening over and over again. The other good thing we do is communication and follow-up. So we communicate all our investigation findings, and we actually report all our incidents that happen as well. We redact everything and share it across the organization so that we can learn from where the losses are occurring and what changes we're making. And then we have a good follow-up system as well to make sure that the recommendations actually happen. And that's the Joint Health and Safety Committee. They watch an action list that's in the manager's folder, and they watch it on a monthly basis. We do statistical review both monthly and annually. So I'm not going to go deep into this, but we do publish a report. I publish it periodically on Jostle as well, just showing how we're doing with our stats, both leading indicators and lagging indicators. And then we look for trends on a regular basis, and we set targets every year. So some of our targets right now, we're focusing on behavior safety. We're focusing actually on the Stop, Think, Act campaign after finding that we had a trend developed where we found in an incident investigations, we found that the causation came down to failure to identify a hazard or failure to correct the hazard. So we've introduced a Stop, Think, Act campaign, getting everyone to take it quite seriously and do like a field level risk assessment before they start work every day. So we're going to be measuring the success of our targets every year as well, and we publish it at the end of the year. The other part is we have a regular review of our program to see how we are performing, and it's an actual WorkSafe BC audit that we do every year, and it's called Certificate of Recognition. I think we're in our 8th year this year. So we've got an internal a few of us who are trained as internal auditors. Every 3rd year, we get an external safety professional who comes and audits us. And it's simply a continuous improvement opportunity. It looks for holes in our program where we could be doing better. But it also, because it's a WorkSafe BC program, if we participate in it every year, we get another rebate on our WCB premiums. So for instance, the check we just received was $34,500 because it was based on 2020 payroll. So it's always about a 10% premium rebate. So that's another good reason to do that audit. But for me, it's continuous improvement. And finally, another good part of our success is due to our return to work program. So we've got a formal documented program that's been in play for over 10 years now. And what it is we have, if someone gets injured, both non-work related and work related, of course, we can get involved early, contacting that worker, letting them know we have these red injury folders. That's what that picture is. If it's a work-related injury, an employee would take that folder as soon as they are injured at work, and it gives them information on how to make the WCB claim, and it gives their doctor information on the fact that we do have light duties available and job functional, what do they call them now? Physical demands analyses or functional demands analysis for every occupation in the city. So we can give that information to a doctor who has seen the injury and decide what sort of duties this employee could do. And then quite often they're allowed to return to work on a light duty program rather than sitting at home while they're injured. So that's been quite successful. And like I mentioned, it's not just work related, it's also non-work related. And we actually are seeing that the demand is a lot higher for non-work related injury and illness. So we've got a kinesiologist who reports to me, and we work together and help ensure that we can accommodate an employee to come back to work while they're still healing or while they're experiencing an episodic illness or cancer treatment, that sort of thing. So it's seen as quite a benefit to our employees, but it also has a benefit to our WCB premiums, of course, too. And that is it. Is there any questions on anything?
Mr. Garbutt, you wanted to?
So I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before council had some questions, I just wanted to highlight, I would tell you that occupational health and safety is a huge priority for our organization, the workers on the ground. We have an excellent joint health and safety committee that works very closely between our management staff, our QP staff, and I personally as CAO have had a long history through my life in working in some areas that some people consider quite dangerous in aggregates and underground utility construction. So as an organization, it's one of our core values to address this health and safety of our workers, and that translates into health and safety of the public. So I really want to acknowledge the work that Ms. Knappman has done in her leadership role in our organization, as well as the investment of time and effort by our management group, our QP staff, and our joint health and safety committee members. As you can see, there's a bottom line outcome that's very positive on the financial side for us, but that health and safety item is really important. And our community ourselves, our contracting community as well, they also take this very seriously. So organizationally, it's really important. So I just want to say thank you. And unfortunately, we don't have our joint health and safety committee people here with us, but we're going to do a post on Jocelyn after this, thanking them. So thanks for that.
Thanks very much. And yeah, and I can echo that. I've had the pleasure of being part of the day of mourning for the last 7 or so years. And so seeing how workplace injury, it's certainly affected my life, and so to be able to be part of that day and to see how many people come out to support is absolutely fantastic. This has generated quite a lot of questions and or comments, and we'll start with Councillor Hillian.
Thanks very much, Mayor, and thanks so much, Paige, for not only the report, but the very important work that you do and have continued to do for the city. It's really gratifying to see some of the positive results. I'm just wondering, though, you've had something to deal with over the last several years that you probably never would have imagined, and I wonder if you could give us just a really brief glimpse into what sort of demands the pandemic and all the health and safety aspects of managing through that created for you and city staff?
Well, I think we did actually a really very good job through COVID. And I think one of the reasons I can say that is we worked so well together on all the risk assessments and safety plans that became needed. It was a huge workload, but the Joint Health and Safety Committee was a big help during that time. And as far as results from that, I'm only aware of one potential workplace exposure, and that employee chose not to report it to WorkSafe. He wasn't confident it was a work exposure. So I think we did really well in the plans that we put in place, but it was a big demand for sure. Nothing I could see coming. Well, I shouldn't say that. We actually have been talking about the pandemic coming for a lot of years. So we had to just take that exposure control template that I had and make it live, and it worked.
Well, thanks very much. I think you're underestimating how much extra work it probably created for all of you. But I just really appreciate your efforts to keep the city operational during that time. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And next we have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Ms. Knappman. I don't have a question. It's more of a comment. Occupational health and safety, strangely, has been part of my life for a long, long time. My dad worked in that field for decades, and I was probably the only kid in our neighborhood who mowed the lawn with over the ear earmuffs. And though I didn't appreciate it at the time, I do now. And probably in my next conversation, I'm going to mention and kind of brag about some of these numbers. These are really impressive on every single metric right down the line. I was particularly struck by, I think it was 59% fewer injuries over the previous 9 years. That's just, stunning, and the proof is in the pudding. That speaks to the effectiveness of you and everyone else who's working on this. And I think it's, also interesting to note that if I did the math right, I believe there was a $60-something thousand reduction in our fees. And then the $34,000 payment back, that's $100,000. So as well as taking care of the people in the City of Courtenay family, and you've also taken care of the people in the wider community by helping to keep taxes down. And it's a considerable achievement. And then to hear that you actually had a plan on the shelf for a pandemic, just waiting in case it happened. You're maybe one of the only people in the country who was prepared when it happened. So anyway, just thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for the kind words.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton and Councillor Theos.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm curious to know of whether since there's been an implementation of people working from home at times, if that's actually affected the numbers over the last few years, and because you did talk about people are injured that they're sitting at home, but rather than being off work, would they be maybe doing lesser duties but at home?
In our program right now, it's not as much working at home. We can provide sedentary duties, depends on the type of injury, illness, but typically we bring them back to work and put them in a safe environment at work to recover. So that's the most typical plan right now. Potentially we can go to working at home, and we saw some good success during COVID that way. So I hope we can progress that way, but we have to get, I think, procedures in place first. But right now, we definitely can bring people back in a safe environment to a sedentary work environment to do their training and writing safe work procedures and that sort of thing. Yep.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Councillor Warren.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Thanks so much for the report. I was really interested in the piece around the frontline staff and the folks who are out in the field. And I know that our bylaw department has increased. There's been a lot more call outs. And I just wanted to ask if I know some of the directors are doing some training around obviously around urban issues and folks that they're encountering, and really looking at how to, I guess, prevent risk by relationship building and all that kind of stuff. So I was curious if you had anything to say about that. I know when in my other job, we had a working alone policy where we had to do that risk assessment. And sometimes you'd go out to a home and someone would have a dog bite or something like that. Like there's things that you just don't expect or you don't necessarily have on your risk assessment. And so I was just curious what kind of specific measures you've put in with maybe more frontline contact with folks in the field. Thanks.
So for bylaw in particular, we've had a risk assessment in place for probably 5 or 6 years, and it's definitely gets reviewed at least once a year as things change and continue to change. And some of the control measures that have been put in place is we've got a really well-functioning working alone program right now that's electronic, and it's got a remote emergency button that can be carried in a pocket or whatever, and will automatically call into the monitoring station and get immediate help. Or then there's a whole different layers in there too, but that's the most extreme situation. But on that risk assessment, we try and minimize working alone as much as possible. So it's almost always 2 bylaw officers out there, and there's very few tasks that they can do working alone. And when they do, then they have that working alone app with the extra level of protection there to call emergency help. So that's just one example, but they've also done some good training in workplace violence prevention and conflict resolution. And I believe there's some training that I'm not even aware of right now that's been happening just recently too. And I can't really speak to that because I'm not on top of it, but.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for those de-escalation skills before something starts to become a problem. Thank you.
And Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I would say there is a component that Paige had talked to through the Strengthening Communities Grant, and that's going to be rolling out both for elected officials as well as our own staff, other staff for local governments, as well as for service providers. And we have reached out to Comex First Nation on that. And that is the point, to have some shared experience and understand some of the issues that will be working in our urban population. It's really a big change that's happened through the city, and those additional resources in our bylaw department have allowed us to have those backups and those safety procedures, and it's enhanced our ability to respond. So these are good examples of different areas working together to enhance our responsiveness. And we look forward to the bylaw work that's going to happen in the new year, just in some more policy development, et cetera. So I just wanted to add to that. So thanks.
Excellent. Yeah, just a spectacular report. Really thankful you came in and gave us the numbers and a little bit of a breakdown on what's going on. As a council, sometimes we're a bit removed from those day-to-day things. And so again, all the numbers are pretty impressive from the very low numbers of issues that we have, but then also obviously getting those remunerations for having a good system in place.
Okay, thank you. It was my pleasure to present that.
All right. And with that, all those in favor, any opposed, and your report passes. So thank you very much. That's great. Next, we have aquatic services strategy. Excellent. It's been moved and seconded and off to staff.
Thank you, through the mayor, and we have Craig Rushton is just going to give a quick introduction, and the consultants that have worked on this project are going to carry through.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Through the CEO to mayor and council. As you know, city staff in the Comox Valley Regional District have been working with RC Strategies in the development of an aquatic services strategy. The two key deliverables for that is the development of a 10-year aquatic services implementation strategy, taking into consideration aquatic services in the Comox Valley over a 25-year timeframe, and conducting an options analysis for the renewal, replacement, or relocation of either or both the Courtney District Memorial Pool or the CVRD Sports Center Pool. So the project's at about 50% completion with the phase one of our learning engagement phase is now completed. And today we have Rob Parks and Mike Roma from RC Strategies to summarize the key findings and the learnings from the community engagement phase in the What We Heard report, and to answer any questions that council has at this stage in the strategy. So I'll hand it over to Mike and Rob.
Thanks, Craig. Your worship, members of council, members of AMIN, thanks for having us here. Rob and I are actually calling in from Treaty 6 territory. So that's the traditional territory of the Cree people and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I just wanted to take this opportunity to peek my head in and introduce myself as a project manager for the project. And I'm kind of doing that in a co-project manager role with another gentleman named Brian Johnston. So you'll definitely see both of our faces at the next meeting, but this is really Rob's show. Rob's our engagement lead, and we're just kind of giving you a sneak peek into what we heard in the various engagements that we've undertaken for this project. I think we have a slide deck that we might pull up. Sorry if Craig, if we're supposed to pull it up. Okay, there we go, great. And if you can just go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I just wanted to also explain the process. Craig kind of alluded to this, but we are about halfway through, and we've spent all of our efforts and time thus far learning about aquatics in the Valley. So that includes looking at facilities, reviewing background information and policy from both the regional district and the city, and also bringing our understanding of aquatics, indoor and outdoor aquatics trends and leading practices and so on into the mix. We also have an architect on our team, which will be kind of conducting their work from now on, because we are going to be looking at the future of aquatics infrastructure in the valley, but also how those services are delivered and how you invest in them and what kinds of outcomes you want to see through your investment. So we're about halfway through. We do plan to be back in front of both the regional district and the city early in 2023 to kind of go through the actual strategy. But again, this is a sneak peek into what we've heard and just a quick overview of our process. So with that, I'm going to leave you in the good hands of Rob Parks and warn you, I guess, that you'll see me again, hopefully relatively soon, to go through the actual strategy. So thank you, and off to you, Rob.
Thanks, Mike, and pleased to be here. Appreciate to get a bit of time on your agenda here today. So the part that I'm speaking about here, the What We Heard report, is sort of in the middle of the screen there in the orange. I believe you did get the report, and one comment I'll make about it is it's close to being finalized, but we're still doing a few little tweaks to it to completely finalize it. There is another report that we are generating that will include all of the other elements of research that will ultimately be used to kind of lead into that strategy and those couple of pieces that Craig did talk about. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Not going to go through a lot of the What We Heard report, but I do want to just comment on a couple of items regarding it. And so this piece that's in front of you right now is really about those different tactics that we used and the level of participation in there. And I'm going to take a moment to speak to this. There really were three main strands of engagement that we did. You'll see there's 4 rows here, but we fielded a survey with households and residents in the Comox Valley, and that really are the first couple of rows, and I'll speak to that participation in just a moment. There was a community group or stakeholder group survey that we fielded, and then we actually held a number of meetings with a variety of groups and stakeholders in the community. And so let me just speak to the survey at the top there, the coded and the open access. We fielded it in 2 ways. So the coded access is one in which we provided a unique access code to households throughout the Comox Valley. We provided, you see, just over 34,000 codes to households. So everybody had the opportunity to participate. One reason of going through that methodology and actually reaching out, providing that postcard, serves as a bit of a communication and promotion piece itself. And it does actually cause people who may not in this instance be particularly interested in aquatics or strong users to actually participate in the survey to a much greater degree than if we just did a kind of an open survey to people about aquatics. So that coded access survey, you'll see about 1,200 responses. We wish we had 100% response rate. We didn't. We had almost 4%. That's about typical these days. So we're sort of ranging in communities in which we've done this from large and small between 3 and about 10%. The one thing about this number, that 1,200, that's the number I think to focus on, not the 4% participation rate. And that figure, if we'd fielded it entirely randomly, we'd have a margin of error about 2.7%. So the findings are good. Be great to have another thousands of people participate, but I would say that the responses that we did get through the questions now are good responses and would change probably marginally if we had a whole pile of more responses. You start to get around 200 to 300, and between there and what we have now, the responses don't fluctuate a whole bunch. We did have an open access survey, similar questions, but that was for people who may have misplaced or have disposed of their card with their access code. We primarily in the report present the coded access survey and then alongside show what the open access survey is. Typically, the open access survey are people that are a little bit more vested in whatever the topic of the survey happens to be. We invited a number of groups who were particularly interested in aquatics, so that would be your swim clubs, et cetera, to participate in a survey. Smaller number did participate. And then those stakeholder meetings with 23 organizations, it's a little bit broader. As you might appreciate, there's other organizations aside from just say swim clubs who would be interested in aquatic provision in there. And so we spoke to people from the Accessibility Committee, Social Planning Committee, BC Life Saving, North Island College, et cetera, to provide some of their thoughts. So next slide. We did ask at the top if people had actually participated in aquatics at all in the last few years, and those who said they had, we then went on and asked them about their participation or use of these different facilities. And you can see that within the last 3 years, almost everybody who had done any kind of swimming at all had used the aquatic center. About 2/3 of those people had used the sports center pool, and then there's the Courtenay District Memorial Outdoor Pool. So just under half of people who had actually swam at all in the last 3 years had used the outdoor pool. Next slide. We did provide people with a number of statements, and you might call them value statements, regarding the provision of aquatics. And so you'll see up at the top there, 86% strongly agreed and another 11% agreed that all residents in the Comox Valley should have the opportunity to learn to swim. So very strong agreement with that statement. Look at the next one, that there should be therapeutic and rehabilitation opportunities. You get into structured fitness, universal accessibility, and then down there, 58% strongly agreed aquatic facilities should provide children and youth with fun leisure aquatic experiences. So asking these statements gives us some idea on where people's values are in terms of the provision of aquatics. And then if you look down towards the bottom here, aquatic facilities should provide opportunities to connect with other community residents with hot tubs, deck lounge areas, et cetera. Still about 3/4 about 75% of your residents still agreed with that sentiment, but certainly not the same as providing, say, therapeutic and rehab opportunities. Next slide. So there was a wealth of information, and I'm just sort of skimming through it here, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we thought were interesting and important to mention through this meeting. This particular slide focuses specifically on the Courtenay District Memorial Outdoor Pool. And so 4 things that I wanted to mention on this, and then I think I'm time for some questions. So first one there is that the outdoor pool use is primarily around recreation, leisure, swimming, and social activities. Probably not a surprise for you, and I'm sure you've gone by, and at the top of the meeting here, there was a comment about the heat advisory, and you could escape it by going to the outdoor pool. So primarily a recreation, leisure kind of thing, and social activities. There are some factors, though, that are limiting the use of people of using the outdoor pool. And probably the primary one that came out through our engagement was crowding. And so we are doing some work around the actual capacity of the pool. And we look at that through a number of means. But interesting about crowding is it really is a perception kind of thing. And if people think it's full, then they're not likely to visit it. And certainly the pool does have a lot of real strong proponents. And when it's crowded, people just want to stay away a little bit if they can. Certainly there's others who prefer swimming out in natural water bodies, whether it's the ocean or lakes or rivers, and that's limited some people's use of the outdoor pool. There was some comment about hours of operation maybe aren't as conducive to what some people would like. And then the last one there is just looking for some desired amenities and features. So maybe more play and fun features, even some comments about shaded areas. We did ask about satisfaction of the facilities, and what's impacted satisfaction of people who are using it. One item there are change rooms. So just looking for enhanced upkeep of those change rooms would impact the satisfaction. And then there's that crowding thing again. And then the last bullet on here, well, certainly it's a broad array of people and age groups who do use the outdoor facility. What we noticed is that there's a greater propensity for those families with children and youth, or those kids, children and youth, to use the pool more so than just regular, I guess, use of aquatic facilities. So there's more of an attraction to the outdoor pool for that. And then sort of affiliated with that is families with children and youth are more likely to look for fun features like slides and spray elements to really enhance their satisfaction. And so that would be something to consider, and we'll consider as we look at a future for the outdoor pool. And then if we go to the next slide, it's just some overall summary statements that encompass the survey that I've just really skimmed over, that encompass some of the findings from that group survey, and then those meetings that I had with stakeholders. So one, there's good use of the aquatics facilities and they're valued in the community. There's a concern that all members of the community can use the pools. And so that's looking at things like facility scheduling, public transportation to ensure that people can actually get there, and then admission costs. The notion of accessibility and inclusivity is important to consider, and sort of talk about this actually with that last bullet about being able to accommodate all users. And so this is looking at people who have different abilities in terms of mobility, different abilities in terms of their swimming skills, but even inclusivity according to different kinds of cultures and even different people. So we talked to some who spoke about gender identification, talked to some people that talked about body image. And so all of those things really saying that they want their facilities to be able to be welcoming for everybody. There is a desire for new or improved aquatic amenities, from additional dedicated lanes for swimming, therapy, there's that socialization, and then even some of those kind of beach entry and play amenities. And certainly not everybody spoke about all of these things, but these were things that did rise to the top that we're thinking about as we do the strategy. And certainly we're speaking to our architect, the firm is HCMA, as they look at coming up with some solutions for us as well. The Aquatic Center received the highest levels of satisfaction, which I think would make some logical sense in the fact that it does provide a whole array of opportunities from kind of that more sort of fitness element and competition, as well to the leisure components. And then that last bullet I've referred to a little bit in terms of accommodating all users. So I think that's it. Last slide, I think, is just for questions. And so at this point, I'll pause and take any questions or listen to any comments that you have.
Excellent. Thanks very much. I appreciate that. And how did I know Councillor Helene had his hand up? I couldn't see, but I felt it. So something about the force. So Councillor Helene, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Rob, and your colleagues for the report. You hit you hit the nail on the head when you indicated how incredibly fortunate we are around here. We have a choice of swimming in the ocean, the lake, and numerous rivers. Of course, access to all of those becomes an issue as established access points get more and more crowded. But I did want to ask about our outdoor pool. We've been given indication in the last couple of years leading up to this study that communities in other parts of the province, maybe across the country, are tending to move away from outdoor pools as features of their community. I'm just wondering if you can comment on that, whether that is the case in your experience. And if it's the case, does it relate to things like cost of maintenance, or is there some changes in user patterns that have brought that about?
So thank you for the question, and through the chair, it is an interesting question. And At one point, I would have said that's exactly what's happening, that communities are starting to get away from it. But there's a couple of things at play there. One is just the costs of providing aquatics. And so we've done a fair bit of work on aquatics in Alberta, and actually recently in Saskatchewan, and I'll maybe just comment on those instances in reference to your question. So one of the communities in Alberta, just probably about 5 years ago, never had aquatics, and they went down the road of building and opening a brand new outdoor pool. And so that sort of seemed unusual, but in that instance for them, it was an opportunity for them to provide aquatics. That was less expensive to do it on a seasonal basis than if they developed an indoor one and operate it year round. And that was the decision that they had made. I mentioned Saskatchewan. So we're doing some aquatic work in Regina. Regina's got a lengthy history of operating outdoor pools, and we did some work for them a couple of years ago that was more of a broad master plan. And in there, we spoke about maybe opportunities for them to actually reduce the provision of aquatics. And in other words, we gave them, I guess, a little bit of a license where they could look at reducing the number of outdoor pools that they had, and they didn't go down that route. The community had been used to that level of service, and much like your residents, those who use the outdoor pool love the outdoor pool, and so they made the decision that they were going to maintain that level of service. I would say that in other communities that we're starting to interact with, and it's coming to a cost. If they have an outdoor pool, they start looking at that. And I know that there's some decisions being made to look at closing it, but there's certainly a lot of pushback in the community because they're a great facility, right? When the weather's good, and people certainly love them, but it's not universal, certainly in terms of communities backing away from outdoor pools.
Yeah, thanks for that. If you get a chance to be here at the end of the summer, we have a pretty unique event at our outdoor pool called Puchapalooza, where people can bring their dogs down for a swim. I think that feature alone would create a lot of fans in our community. Thanks.
Yeah, it would for sure. Yeah.
So thanks very much, Councillor Helene, for the questions and comments. I don't see any further questions or comments. So with that, all those in favor of receipt? And that's unanimous. And thanks very much for your report, Rob. And it sounds like we'll get in some future reports as well in the future. So looking forward to them.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. With that, we are going into staff reports, the Freedom of the City policy. And if for Councillor Frisch.
I'll move that council approve the Freedom of the City Award policy 0290.00.01/CP.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and now we'll hear the report. Make sure we actually, then we'll vote on it.
Thank you through the mayor to council. I'm just presenting this report on behalf of our Director of Corporate Services. Ms. O'Connell and staff in Legislative Services have done some research in response to direction from council quite 2 or so years ago. The staff report, beginning on page 85 of the agenda, provides an overview framework with which council would utilize in their deliberations on the award of a Freedom of the City. There's some background in the history, talks about the types of initiatives that can be undertaken in Freedom of the City. The city started granting Freedom of the City Award in 1953. Since Courtsneed's incorporation in 1915, we have 23 individuals and 2 organizations who have received the award. The most recent recipient of the award was granted in 2022 posthumously to our former Director of Recreation, Culture and Community Services, Randy Witchart. And the staff report provides an overview of who has received this honor from the city and the organizations. It's a fairly straightforward policy, similar to many policies that organizations and, municipalities in BC have adopted. The policy itself starts on page 93 of the agenda, and I'm available to answer any questions that council may have.
All right, thanks so much for that. And first we have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the report. I did have a question about obviously individuals are eligible, but it seems the only group that's contemplated are military units, either in Canada or overseas. And I'm just wondering why, what the thinking is behind that very specific category of groups. That can think of a number of groups in our community that contribute greatly and probably tick many of the boxes or all of the boxes that are listed there. And I was wondering why why we had not contemplated other groups beyond those in the military as being worthy of this kind of recognition.
Mr. Garvin.
Thank you, through the mayor, to Councillor Cole Hamilton. I had asked that question myself, not super familiar with the underlying legislation in the community charter that gives us this, authorizes that. Ms. O'Connell advised me that the legislation envisions some special rights to these things, and the determination by the province at that point was to focus in on individuals and military units, and there's some history there. I would say, and maybe Ms. Proton might correct me, but ultimately we have a proposal here. It's our first cut at it, and we may take some direction from council if we want to maybe potentially review that. Because I do know that in some of the deliberations or discussions that council has been having, they do focus in potentially on some organizations.
And you've got a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you very much. In your reference to the community charter, do I understand from it that only military units are eligible under the terms of the community charter, or do we have the option to, given the type of recognition we're contemplating, to expand the field to include other groups?
Madam Clerk.
Thank you. I've got the section of the charter here, and what it says is that a council may confer freedom of the municipality on a distinguished person or a distinguished unit of the armed forces of Canada or another nation. So those are the two options that it has in the legislation.
It's very, very prescriptive, it sounds like. Yeah, Mr. Garvin.
Yeah, I want to preempt some additional discussion, but if council wants us to consider that option, we can proceed with this policy with direction from council to examine that issue that you raise. In my discussions with Ms. O'Connell, we thought that could potentially be the case, and we can do some advocacy, et cetera.
Maybe modernize or get that modernized to be more modern, for lack of a better term. Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, I'll throw a wrench in things and bring up another perspective, as I often do. This is dating back to the Greeks. This is going way back in history, and refers to the award being given to the elite. It's obviously a very, very old practice, and I think that it's important to recognize people and organizations for their exemplary contributions to the community. But I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can take a more modern look at this. I'm not sure how many municipalities are still doing freedom of the city. I did a search in a few places, and they hadn't had any awards for quite some time. I would just like to see a more modern look at this, and particularly with our strategic priorities of reconciliation. This is a very colonial practice. I know that we do have, not all white men in photographs in council chambers back at City Hall, but I would really like to see a way to diversify this honor and take a look at this practice and how we can maybe improve on it and be and maybe be less political about it in terms of maybe having involvement from the community rather than usually what happens, and it's in the report, that a council member brings forward a name or the name comes from the community, but a council member brings it forward. And yeah, I would just, I don't know if there's any appetite to send this to staff for a little bit more evaluation or look at it, but that's the way I feel. I feel like it's a little bit incongruent with some of the things that we're trying to do at the city. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Councillor Morin and Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't necessarily have a problem with the policy as presented, although I do agree with some of the comments Councillor Morin shared. I think, though, part of our challenge is how does this connect with the larger issue of how the city recognizes citizens who are worthy of recognition in some exceptional way. And this policy relates to one aspect, which is the tradition of freedom of the city, which is the name has appropriately been changed over the years. But you know, we don't really know how our protocols in relation to naming landmarks, streets, and other such landmarks come about. We have a ton of roads and avenues in the city that are named after pioneers. I don't know whether we still do that or not. We also have an annual volunteer recognition that has undergone some changes in recent years. So there's a whole context here where I think we can look at this issue of recognition and perhaps consider whether the policy needs to address more than just this one particular aspect. I appreciate the work that staff have done, and I don't want to saddle them with a lot more in relation to this, but I think it is an important aspect of what we do as a community to recognize people, and I think it's important that we consider how to get it right. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And you know, looking at what other municipalities have done, and if you take a look at the city of Vancouver, they have recognized organizations like the YMCA, et cetera, with the freedom. So I think, although there may be a legislative requirement, I don't think that anybody goes to jail if you take some artistic license or you know, again, modernize it within our own purview, and it could be something that we could bring to UBCM even or to other levels of organizations to get that change so that it is modernized. Having said that, if you look at the city of Vancouver and other cities for that matter, not only do they have the Freedom Award, but they also have their own Excellence Awards or other things like that, where they can actually say, you know, and those tend to be annual and possibly more prescriptive and demanding in the sense that you'd have to come up with names every year, whereas the Freedom Award does seem to be a little bit more like popcorn, where you go for a while without them and then they come back. Anyways, I just thought I'd throw that in there as if it's something that we want to look at, I think it's absolutely reasonable to go down that path. And again, I agree wholeheartedly with what Councillor Morin was saying. Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Also in agreement. I think that I particularly was taken with the idea that perhaps it should be removed from the political realm. I don't think necessarily we as councillors have a better view of who is of note or deserves recognition in the community. And we may not bring sufficient diversity to that particular opinion. I'm not a bastion of diversity myself. So I am wondering if we do want to consider an alternative other than the recommendation that it be referred back to staff to consider options that would be more inclusive and perhaps of a community-based committee. But I'm guessing that Councillor Morin probably has something more clear in mind. So I'll cede the floor to her.
All right, Councillor Morin, no pressure.
Yeah, just not to be a negative. I don't want to, I want people to be recognized, and I would love organizations to be recognized. I find the language in this, because it is a bit archaic, it's actually very limited. Like if you read the language of who should be awarded freedom of the city, it's quite a narrow definition, really. It's talking about basically a very exclusive group of people, and I think if we want to really recognize again, to be more inclusive, I think it would be good to just take a look at maybe what other municipalities have done where they are awarding to organizations, maybe looking at criteria. I don't want to create tons of work. I don't think there's a rush for this either necessarily. But I think it would be good just to take a look at this. We don't have to do things just because they've always been done this way. I think it is important, especially when we're looking at reconciliation and things like that, to not just rubber stamp things all the time, to actually look at how our policies are dovetailing with each other and supporting each other. So I certainly am in favor of people being recognized, absolutely, and organizations. And I would just like to see this, looked at and maybe modernized a little bit. Thanks. And I'm not sure what to do because there's a recommendation on the floor. Thanks.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we can do is that recommendation is on the floor. We take a vote, and if it passes, it passes. But our mighty CAO.
I just thinking out loud a little bit here. So this has come back based on correction of council, and the freedom of the city has it is enabled by legislation, and by virtue of that legislation, there are some rights conferred to Freedom City, including being an elector. So it may be that we can proceed with the freedom of the city in the spirit of the legislation, and you can direct staff to look at other ways of recognition. And we can also amend a policy that is adopted through the life of this. We started in 1953, didn't make any significant moves until 1984. So it may very well be that there are a certain type of individual in the community that would get the freedom itself. It could be another way to do an award that the city is really free to develop whatever awards they want. Some municipalities have a range of awards similar to, best, they have building awards, they have awards in terms of community service. In some communities that's done in the newspapers, but in some communities they do it themselves. So we as staff can come back with a number of options. This freedom is really in response to specific legislation, and because by getting the freedom you do such things as you're allowed to vote, so there are some issues. So we don't take we've come back with some options to provide a framework, because there wasn't one previously, and we can also take direction to either come back with some amendments, come back with another option to look at recognition in the community that might parallel or might provide differences. Some communities give out the key to the city. That's a very 80s thing to do for people. But my point being, when you came back, there is in our community, there is something that has been awarded under specific guidance, and we were coming back with some ways for council to consider that. Given that it's required to be unanimous, that is also a bit of a challenge. If a community group wanted to come to council without any, that background. So it's kind of a pretty high bar to meet council unanimous if it doesn't come from council themselves. So many items there to discuss. And I always appreciate our, kind of the deliberation that happens around here. We have provided some criteria, but we take whatever direction that council would like in that regard.
Oh, his hand isn't up. I was hoping Councillor Helene had his hand up. Back to Councillor Moore.
Well, in lieu of Councillor Helene not coming up with profound words, I could take a stab at an amendment, which would be taking the recommendation but expanding on it to look at including organizations for staff to go back and look at including organizations, and then also for staff to explore other ways of recognizing citizens, which would include all the great things that our CAO said and others. Thanks.
All right, that's been, so this is the amendment. And it's clear, so that looks good. And we do have other organizations in the community, Rotary clubs, and the Chamber of Commerce has a community awards as well, lifetime achievements, those kinds of things. So I think as a community, we are relatively well served in a matter of ways, but I totally see how the freedom of the city requirements stuff do have a real need to be modernized. And as I'm thinking about the example of Vancouver, I'm realizing that they're not under the community charter because they have their own charter. So maybe they just change it as they please. But that does kind of get me back to the point I made before about ABICC, UBCM, et cetera, to see if something like that could be modernized for other communities. So that being said, we do have an amendment on the floor. Oh, Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to point out that the staff report did have an option 2, which effectively would negate the need for the amendment. It was to refer the matter back to staff and provide direction, which the discussion at the table is probably provided. I mean, however you proceeded is your decision, but I wasn't sure if people had noted the option 2 that was in the staff report.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hillian. And Councillor Moore, you had a comment?
Well, just in response to Councillor Hillian, I don't know if that's a cleaner, maybe staff can let us know if that's a cleaner option, but I did want to also mention that there are several municipalities who are getting rid of your worship as well. So there are many common old practices that are being changed with the time. So that's sort of the spirit of where I'm coming from. Would it be cleaner to go with that recommendation instead? Option 2?
Okay, we'll read back the motion. We'll have Ms. Proton read it back.
If I understand correctly, the amendment was to approve the policy, but to include other organizations than armed forces units, and also to direct staff to look at options to recognize individuals. So the option number 2 in the report is to not approve the policy, but refer back to staff. And the amendment motion that's on the floor right now is to approve the policy, but adding organizations into it.
Sorry.
I think my original amendment fits for what I was going for. Thanks.
Yeah, I would support that. So the amendment's there. Has it been seconded? Yeah. Been seconded? Will, and then Councillor McCollum, over to you.
Yeah, just a question, I think, for staff. I'm supportive of going with option 1 with the amendment rather than just a straight refer back to staff. But are we, I mean, the answer that I understood to the question around military unit versus organization was that we were limited by what was in the community charter. So are we creating an issue by requiring that change in the policy now, or the way that the amendment's written?
Mr. Garvin.
Thank you, through the mayor. To Councillor McCollum, I think we're fine. I think we can make our own way. We do need to clarify, though, that by conferring the freedom, that some of those things would not come along with that. I do think that ultimately taking some proactive steps, as this is something that's been important in our city by virtue of it, the number of times it's been awarded, and then to the variety of citizens who got that, including those organizations. That would be my position. We just need, I think, to clarify a little bit some of the, well, the rights conferred by the freedom itself, but I don't see that as a thing. And really, ultimately, this is a good ability for us to work with council to make sure that we're meeting the community's needs.
Great, thanks for that answer.
All right, I see no further lights on right now. So on the amendment, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Oh, Councillor Hillian, just to confirm, you were in favor?
In favor, yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's a bit of a delay, so we weren't sure if we had said something that we shouldn't have. So that being said, we do have a motion as amended on the floor. All those in favor? Any opposed? Excellent. All right, I think we're good. Thanks for that good discussion, and looking forward to any changes that we can do in the future as well. Moving into development services, variance permit 2205 1526 Trumpeter Crescent. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'll move that council approve option 1 and issue development variance permit number 2205.
All right, and that's been moved and seconded. Thank you for that. And Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, as outlined in the staff report, we had no responses to the public notification, and the recommendation is to approve the variance.
Excellent. Are there any questions? Councillor Morin.
Yeah, all I wanted to say is, yeah, this is a garage just for any. It just seems, yeah, it seems so interesting that I wish we could make these a little bit more clear cut. I mean, I know it's adjusting a setback, but it would be nice if we didn't have to bring all these. There's no opposition and it's a garage. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Morin. Okay, that being said, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Next, we have variance permit 2106-841 Cliff Avenue. Councillor Morin.
Was the CEO one?
Do we want to speak to it first? Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I'll move that based on the July 25th, 2022 staff report development variance permit number 2106-841 Cliff Avenue. Council approve option 1 and that council directs staff to provide public notice to adjacent property owners and occupants and request feedback regarding development variance permit number 2106 and that council consider variance permit number 2106 at the August 29th, 2022 council meeting.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. And Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Just the staff report provides an overview of the requested height variance. We are experiencing in the community some pretty significant gaps in cellular coverage. This application will help to address those issues. Mr. Marshall's here if council has any questions. Ultimately, the notification will come forward and determine whether you have some issues from the localized public in this regard. I would say that across the country, there's been various deliberations about this matter of telecommunication infrastructure. We do know that we have this very significant gap in the city, and outlined in the staff report, staff have spoken to the advocate and confirmed that co-location is possible. Unfortunately, in the industry itself, there is some exclusivity sometimes arranged as it relates to this, but Industry Canada requires co-location in this regard. So we provide that. Mr. Marshall's here if you have any questions.
Okay, we've got a motion that's been moved and seconded. As most of us are aware, we had a little bit of a cell internet glitch earlier in the month, which is really laser focused, both the federal government and industry on making sure that doesn't happen. But again, this is really about providing better service. So I think the outcome's pretty positive. I don't see any questions or comments. Now I do. Councillor Theos.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, better technology and communication, is good for citizens and for business. But just curious about the wording of microwave dishes and what that emits. As far as we know, it's there was talk about the 4 microwave dishes, but just that word alone just makes me wonder what that is.
I mean, I could probably answer it the best, but it's not really my place. Mr. Marshall.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen what they look like, but I'm assuming it's a dish
I didn't change.
shaped object.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, page 110 shows it's a little bit difficult to see in the printed version, but what the elevation looks like, they're vertical panels that provide that. And they did outline, the applicant has said that this application complies with Health Canada Safety Code 6 regulations. So if that was what you're sort of generally questioning, Councillor Theos, ultimately we don't have residential in this area as well. It's not close to any schools or daycares, etc. So these are some of the siting criteria that when people adopt telecommunication tower siting requirements. Now, because this is and I'll quote our colleague, Mr. Shaw, an appurtenance on a building, it's slightly different than freestanding cellular towers. And there are requirements when they're freestanding. And so you'll see in large municipalities, in some cases they're on buildings, in some cases they're on BC Hydro poles. And it's really designed to try and provide that connectivity that business and travelers are looking for.
And that's where my question, what's going is making sure that it's safe for the citizens.
Yeah.
Speak around, but ensuring that it's safe for the citizens and businesses around, that any emissions are not going to be causing any harm to the people that are in the area or beyond.
And I think that goes to the comment that it meets Health Canada guidelines. So, yeah. Yeah, and I would, to your point, Councillor Theos, if you look at the amount of power that's been emitted and stuff, all that stuff has been reduced significantly. Cell phones back in the 80s and 90s were like 1 or 2 watts, and you could talk like in basements and stuff under in car parks, whereas now those wattages are much lower and therefore safer for people's uses. So, all right, yeah, no problem. I do enjoy the conversation. That being said, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And we move on to air quality and wood smoke mitigation. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So I'll move that based on the July 25th, 2022 staff report, air quality and wood smoke mitigation, council approve option 1 and direct staff to 1, review and revise the following bylaws to regulate excessive wood smoke that is causing a nuisance. A, prevention of nuisance bylaw number 2804, B, municipal ticket information bylaw number 2435, C, nuisance abatement and cost recovery bylaw number 2987. 2, develop a metric in consultation with the community and other local governments to identify excessive wood smoke. 3, develop a public education campaign to communicate upcoming bylaw expectations and encourage residents to reduce their use of wood burning appliances. And 4, design a network of PM 2.5 air monitoring devices that report the real-time PM 2.5 concentrations on a publicly available map. Coordinate with other governments in the region to ensure new monitoring devices are part of a regional PM 2.5 monitoring network.
All right, and Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Through the mayor, we have Janine Tazioli, our environmental engineer, is going to do a short presentation. We do recognize that some of this discussion has happened at the regional district board table, but this has been identified as a very serious item in our community. So maybe turn it over to Janine.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, Council. The objective of today's presentation is to provide an update on the Council resolutions and associated staff recommendations to address air quality concerns and mitigate wood smoke. So fine particulate matter, also known as PM 2.5, is an ongoing concern for residents in the Comox Valley. Measurements from the Provincial Air Monitoring Station at Courtney Elementary indicate that PM 2.5 is a pollutant of greatest concern within the city, exceeding the BC air quality objectives multiple times per year. Other air contaminants, such as nitrogen dioxide and ozone, are far below air quality guidelines. Concentrations of PM 2.5 are highest during the winter months and winter evenings from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. and are low almost all other times except for periods of wildfire smoke. And we can see these patterns in the graphs presented here. This is a graph of the monitoring data from our provincial air station. So many winter evenings, the Comox Valley also experiences atmospheric inversions, which causes emissions to become trapped. This occurs at the same time that temperatures are dropping, people are arriving home, and wood-burning appliances are used to keep warm. The smoke generated from numerous wood-burning appliances operating simultaneously during an inversion causes smoke to accumulate and poses a health risk to all residents. Next slide. To address these ongoing concerns with air quality, Council passed the following resolutions. Therefore, be it resolved that Council direct staff to prepare a report to consider options for a bylaw to address nuisance wood burning and ensure responsible storage of wood and operation of wood burning appliances. 2, staff be directed to identify consequences for measurably excessive wood smoke emissions. And 3, staff be directed to develop a policy to encourage voluntary no burning activities when forecast air quality health is at greatest risk. So staff considered options for a bylaw to address nuisance wood burning. The key findings from this analysis are summarized in the colorful boxes. So we found that nuisance wood burning bylaws would allow the City of Courtney to address public concerns related to excessive wood smoke. Currently, the province of BC operates on a complaint-based system to enforce the open burning smoke control regulation and the solid fuel burning domestic appliance regulation. The broad jurisdiction of the province makes it impractical to respond to neighborhood concerns. Developing a bylaw will allow local bylaw officers to address and respond to the situation. We also found that the particulate matter emissions inventory that was compiled by the BC Ministry of Environment in 2015 indicated that wood burning appliances emit 98.7% of all particulate matter emissions related to space heating. Therefore, a nuisance bylaw would be focused on the most significant source, PM 2.5, within the City of Courtney. Wood burning appliances also have the greatest impact of those living in close proximity to them. This was observed in the mobile monitoring study conducted by Matthew Wagstaff from UBC in 2017. The study mapped the variation in PM 2.5 concentrations across the valley and identified hotspot areas. It was found that local air quality was better in areas where wood burning appliances were not used as a primary heat source. And fourthly, the community charter grants municipalities the authority to regulate nuisances, which include the emission of smoke, dust, gas, or other effluva that is liable to foul or contaminate the atmosphere. The City of Courtney has an existing bylaw framework to address nuisances, and it is recommended that existing bylaws be reviewed and revised to regulate excessive wood smoke that is causing a nuisance. So the existing bylaws within our framework include the Prevention of Public Nuisances Bylaw, number 28804, the Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw, number 2435, and the Nuisance Abatement and Cost Recovery Bylaw, number 2987. So staff also considered options for a bylaw to ensure the responsible storage of wood and operation of wood burning appliances. So we found that many factors contribute to the efficient operation of a wood burning appliance. The storage of wood and operation of appliances are only a couple of factors. Other factors such as design and certification of the stove, airflow, type of wood, and maintenance of wood burning appliances also influence the amount of smoke produced. As such, narrowly focused bylaws are not expected to be effective. It was also noted that the solid fuel burning domestic appliance regulation already requires that only untreated seasoned wood with a moisture content of less than 20% be burned. A local bylaw prescribing specific storage methods to achieve the provincial moisture requirement is unlikely to offer smoke reductions. Staff also found in the 2018 home heating survey conducted by the CVRD, and that survey suggested a high rate of compliance among Comox Valley residents, with approximately 96% of respondents stacking their wood under a sheltered area with sufficient airflow on 3 sides. As such, it appears as though there's little opportunity to improve air quality by focusing on wood storage methods. The design of the wood burning appliance may have a greater effect on the amount of smoke produced. Of course, the provincial regulations require all wood burning appliances offered for sale in BC to be certified to the US EPA or the CSA emission standard. This has been a requirement since 1994, with the certification standards becoming more stringent over time. Today, wood burning appliances on the market must be rated to emit less than 2 grams per hour of PM 2.5. However, a recent assessment of the US EPA's residential wood heater certification program that was completed by the Northeast states for coordinated air use management identified a systemic failure of the entire certification process. The flaws with the certification process cast doubt on the ability of certified wood burning appliances to meet the rated emission limits, even when the appliances are operated according to the manufacturer instructions. For these reasons, it was found that the most effective bylaws will regulate the smoke that comes out of the chimney instead of regulating the ingredients that go into making a fire. And for that reason, it's recommended that the existing nuisance bylaws be reviewed and revised to regulate excessive wood smoke. So the proposed updates to the existing City of Courtenay nuisance bylaws will require the adoption of a metrics to identify excessive wood smoke. So the following metrics may be considered to evaluate wood smoke. Staff are considering options such as visible distance from the chimney, adverse impact to others, opacity of the smoke, visible rate, flow rate of the smoke, as well as concentration parameters of PM 2.5. It's acknowledged that each metric offers advantages and drawbacks. It's recommended that a metric be developed in consultation with the community and other local governments to identify excessive wood smoke. This metric, once developed, will be used to distinguish the difference between excessive wood smoke from acceptable wood smoke. And once this metric is developed, it is recommended that a public education campaign be developed to communicate upcoming bylaw expectations and ensure residents are aware of the health implications of wood burning, as well as the rebates for electric heating appliances and the wood burning best practices. Staff also considered options for a voluntary burning ban and consulted the air quality meteorologist from the Ministry of Environment. So it was noted that the formula to forecast the air quality health index considers both the concentrations of ozone, nitrogen dioxide, as well as particulate matter. Since in the Comox Valley, only particulate matter is a concern, the air quality health index, the formula itself, is not actually sensitive enough to forecast periods of poor air quality. And the records of air quality health indexes indicate that it's rarely forecast to be higher than a low health risk, with the exception of periods of prolonged wildfire smoke. So we'll only see that health risk increase in the case of wildfires. So as an alternative, staff considered if the ventilation index might be a more appropriate trigger for voluntary burning bans. The ventilation index is a forecast published by Environment and Climate Change Canada, and this estimates how well the atmosphere disperses smoke on any given day. This indicates the atmospheric suitability for burning. After having a look at the historic records for the Comox Valley, it was found that there was a high frequency of fair and poor forecasts during the winter months. So this would result in a voluntary burning ban that would last almost the entire winter, with the exception of only a few days per month. So the difficulty in finding a metric to trigger the voluntary burning ban makes it challenging to implement. Also, the atmosphere is always changing, and widely communicating a voluntary burning ban in response to atmospheric changes could be an ongoing challenge. Despite these difficulties, any time that a household chooses not to burn contributes to an improvement in local air quality. So staff recommend that a network of PM2.5 air monitoring devices be designed to report the real-time PM2.5 concentrations on a publicly available map. The development of this monitoring network will be coordinated with other local governments in the region and will integrate with the existing provincial air monitoring station. It's also recommended that an education campaign be developed to encourage residents to reduce their use of wood-burning appliances. Next slide. Staff have participated in the Regional District Airshed Committee and are quite familiar with the community stakeholders, the key concerns related to air quality and wood smoke. The proposed recommendations would be implemented following consultation with community stakeholders and local governments within the region. And in this way, we can ensure that the proposed recommendations will support our collective vision of clean and healthy air year-round for current and future generations. So just a review of our recommendations. We are recommending that we review and revise the bylaws to regulate excessive wood smoke that is causing a nuisance, which include the 3 bylaws listed: the Prevention of Public Nuisances bylaw, the Municipal Ticket Information bylaw, and the Nuisance Abatement and Cost Recovery bylaw. We're also recommending that we develop a metric in consultation with the community and other local governments to identify excessive wood smoke, and that we develop a public education campaign to communicate bylaw expectations and encourage residents to reduce their use of wood-burning appliances. And fourthly, that we design a network of PM2.5 air monitoring devices that report the real-time PM2.5 concentrations on a publicly available map. This will be coordinated with the Regional Airshed Steering Committee to ensure the design supports the development of a regional monitoring network. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. And we have Councillor McCollum.
Thanks. Thanks so much for this report. It's great to see the issue of air quality and wood smoke coming back with some proposed solutions. I'm happy with what's being suggested, and I like what you've outlined. I just have one question. I guess I actually have 2 questions. First of all, is on the metric around what the excessive wood smoke measurement would be and the regional approach. And to me, it certainly does make sense to look to our neighbors and our regional partners to come up with this. But, you know, we've right from the get-go, we saw the value in taking a regional approach, and it's actually really hindered our progress in many ways. I won't bother going into them, but I guess my main concern is, are we going to put some concrete timelines on coming up with a number? And I guess my suggestion would be to look to find a regional approach in a limited amount of time, and if not, perhaps the city will continue to just show leadership on this and hope that our neighbors follow that lead. So I guess that's a bit of a question / comment on that one.
And Mr. Garbutt just wants to respond.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent question. I really appreciate it. I think it's critical that we have that, but we can't not proceed. And so that isn't the intention, and we will action on this and come back. But we do appreciate our elected officials representing that interest at the regional district board. I understand that, like I said, they haven't acknowledged our receipt of our correspondence asking for action on those items. So we strive for regional approach, and we will look on the regulatory side to proceed. So just offer that for council's information.
Thanks for that.
Thanks. I just had one other question, but you know what? There's other lights on, so maybe I'll wait and see if someone else asks my other question. I'll come back. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum, and Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm really happy to see this come back with some more, some real tangible things that can happen. And certainly people who are burning responsibly shouldn't be penalized, and if people need to have an extra way to heat their home and that kind of thing, we don't want to impede that, but we certainly don't want people to be having breathing problems and all kinds of health issues, because we know those people who live in those neighborhoods where those hot spots are know that it's unbearable. We've seen it in person, we've seen the photographs, et cetera, and there are some real bad spots. I guess my question is, with this type of bylaw, we know there are many people renting and lower income folks who are in circumstances that they can't really control because, they're living in a home where there is an older wood stove, or they're not getting dry wood or whatever. I'm wondering if this bylaw is going to go to the landlord of these places, because I bring this up all the time in terms of an equity issue that many low-income families can't afford, even with the better rebates that we have to switch over to heat pumps. I would actually like to see fewer people who have the means get those rebates and just bump up, full subsidies for people who can't afford it, rather than the way that we're doing it. But that's a work in progress, because there's Clean BC rebates as well, and when you combine them, they can be pretty effective. So I guess that's my question, is how are we going to make sure that people who are already struggling financially, trying to keep their families warm, and are maybe renting, or maybe are just low income, are not going to be further stressed with the bylaw? Can we go directly to the owners of the buildings? Thanks.
All right, and Mr. Garbutt wants to respond.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Moore. And we this is challenging. We are entering into these are not levels of regulation that we've typically had in the city. And this is in response to localized health-oriented conditions. These will all be factors in the design of our regulatory approach. And I appreciate raising these questions, because that assists as we develop these regulations. These will be outcomes, though, and when people are renting, they aren't the ones that put the stoves in or take the stoves out. So we'll be eyes wide open on these things. And when it comes to the matter of regulation, we always start with voluntary compliance and working together in that, because this is kind of a 2 or 3 or 5-pronged 5-point plan to get through things, because really the enforcement action is at the end of of our spectrum of things we do, and the education and access, et cetera, are the things that will probably be more effective in these things, in moving our air quality initiatives forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Councillor Morin and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank Ms. Tazioli for the presentation. I do want to commend city staff for kind of taking the bull by the horns here and moving this forward and being a leader in this area. I also want to point out that I still feel like there is a place for wood burning appliances as secondary heat sources. And I think in times of emergencies, we'll find that that's very useful, both for cooking and heating. And I think a lot of the measures that we're looking at here in this new work, which will be a new bylaw, I guess, or adjustments to old bylaws, could turn out to show that proper wood burning is possible, and it might make us rethink our original stance of just completely stopping the installation of new ones. So we'll see how this goes, and it will probably take a few years, I would guess. But yeah, thanks for doing the work.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch, and Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Ms. Tazioli. I really appreciate this. This is a strong report, and I think comes up with substantial and tangible solutions to some of the challenges we're facing with the impacts of wood smoke. I wanted to ask a bit about the proposed network of PM 2.5 monitors. I think that's a really encouraging step to be taking. I think a lack of certainly of real-time data is something which is maybe impeded action. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what a network like that might look like and what sort of the locations, costs, things like that. And I was also wondering if this could serve as a basis for a voluntary no-burn policy. I know that a number of different metrics were assessed in the report, and I was wondering if the data that flows from this network might be useful in that regard.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton, for your questions. First question in regards to what does a design of a PM 2.5 air monitoring network look like? Well, we would want to focus on each of the areas that have distinct characteristics. So considering things like the age of homes, amount of wood smoke observed, but then we also have some practical considerations around access for maintenance. We'll need a power outlet. We also need connection to Wi-Fi to upload the data to the network. So we would need to consider some of those logistic factors as well as those data gathering parameters. So we would have some proposed locations, of course, see if the regional partners are interested in getting involved in that. And it would essentially be a map that you could log onto or have a website link from the City of Courtenay website. You could log into it and see the difference in PM 2.5 concentrations across the city at any given point. And one of the styles of monitors that we are looking at update the data every 10 minutes. So it would be particularly current, and you could see how throughout the evening or throughout a particular period of time, those concentrations change. As far as a voluntary no burn ban, anytime people choose not to burn, improves air quality. So that's something that staff could consider as part of public education campaigns. Really, any trigger or any decision to not burn is definitely an improvement.
All right, thanks very much for that. And Councillor McCollum.
Councillor Hillian can go first because it's my second time.
Good call. And I even noticed that Councillor Hillian put his hand up. So Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. So I would like to return to Councillor McCollum's original question, which is about the time frame for implementation. The report speaks to matters in the 2023 budget, and we also know that it takes time to draft bylaws. So I'm guessing we're looking at sometime next winter for potentially bylaws to be developed and further reports to come forward talking about resource implications. Would that be accurate?
And Mr. Garbutt's going to respond.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Councillor Hillian. It'd likely be in that area. There are some standardized bylaws. We do really need to understand what the resource implications and how we will approach that continuum of compliance. And these are, those are what I use pejorative terms, but ultimately education takes some time, et cetera. And we need to make sure that the steps that we're taking are both effective and we have adequate resources to deliver them, because nothing is worse than bringing in approaches that are not sufficiently resourced or well thought out in terms of their outcomes. And I would say that in our shared environment, it is extremely important. Maybe the focus is the settlement expansion areas identified by the regional growth strategy, but getting a handle on land clearing, burning, yard waste burning. These are the things that are managed, even under the with wood stoves, et cetera, the older ones. They have a and I'm not an expert in this, but the profile of particulate that enters the atmosphere related to some of those items it's really quite important to address.
Yeah, thanks. Just the follow-up to that, the report has a section on administrative implications, and it makes reference to night shifts, among other things. What would be the rationale for that, of having staff working night shift, if that's what the inference refers to?
And Mr. Garbage can answer that one.
Typically, that's when burning occurs, where you would have the heating of houses in the evening. So, staff have done a bit of research. There are other jurisdictions have embarked on this. In Metro Vancouver, they have a special service that was authorized by the province to get into air quality initiatives. So that would be why, because typically burning activities where you need to monitor or opacity, some of those standards, it just doesn't happen in the daytime in some cases. So it does highlight that as we enter in this, it will be important to understand how and when we are in a regulatory or enforcement aspect of that continuum of options, how's that going to happen?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the clarification, although we currently don't have bylaw staff who respond outside of regular working hours. I think we rely on the police for bylaw violations outside of working hours. Would that not apply in a case like this?
I can use this one. No, the RCMP would not be. I'm quite confident that they wouldn't be using RCMP resources in this. It's not. Wouldn't be an immediate life safety issue. We do have to remember that we have limited resources in that regard, and someone could potentially do that, but it would be their ability to respond would be limited. Now, the RCMP does enforce other things like noise and gatherings and parties and various things where that we also have some overlap in the evening. But on the issue of air quality, I would be quite confident in saying that would be a limited RCMP involvement.
Okay, so that is a significant change in level of service. Thanks for clarifying.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, and Councillor McCollum.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the complexity of trying to address potential issues around, this nuisance bylaw of having certain residences where there's continual complaints of excessive wood smoke, and when those properties are inhabited by renters or tenants rather than the homeowner, and how we're going to proceed. Something that occurred to me, and I'm not quite sure where we have jurisdiction here and where we don't, but can we require that properties that have a secondary suite or that have tenants over property owners could be required to have a wood stove only as a secondary source of heating rather than a primary? Or can we require, after it's been determined that there's excessive wood smoke, to have a wood stove that's installed to a certain standard? I'm curious to know if there's other measures that we could take in the case of renters that's not necessarily ticketing.
Through the mayor, thank you. These are some somewhat complex questions, and through our process to develop these regulations, we would look at that. I would say, we don't regulate the tenure of a house, so a change in occupancy would be a little bit difficult. So if someone was living there, they have this standard versus if they rented it out, and these things can be a little bit fluid in the sort of when people own or have their own properties. It gives us, I think we probably, as we develop these regulations, I think we want to work closely with council just to talk about these issues and how can we address them, because definitely it's sort of difficult how to say it, but ultimately to develop the appropriate level of regulation and how we respond, I think it needs to be quite sensitive, because right now some of the issues we are hearing, and this is what I understand, and I'm a little bit later to this file than some of you that are around this horseshoe and those staff members, is that access to good quality firewood for wood stoves is a very big concern. And so in the big picture work of the committee that's been looking at this, it's trying to tackle all aspects of that. And I think that's a good portion of that, is really the quality of what's coming there, and then ultimately down on a property basis to keep things dry, and et cetera. And there's been a lot of really good work done. I think probably reflecting the level or the complexity of regulation itself to really try and do the education side as an effective tool. So I just kind of offer that.
Yeah, it's helpful. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that occurred to me while I was reading this report is that, you know, when you have property that it has a wood stove and then tenants change throughout the year, they don't have the access to buying dry wood should you move into a rental unit in December that, you know, requires it, that the options for buying fuel are very limited. And then you end up in a situation where people are not burning wood that's been dried adequately. So yeah, just trying to think of ways that we could maybe prevent that from happening, and requiring a different heating source would be one of them. So yeah, just wanted to provide those comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum. And I'll kind of go back to, you know, when this sort of came about, when the air monitoring system went in, and then people, you know, they'll, you know, one of the ways that they look at it is that for years there were no air quality advisories, but that's because we didn't have an air quality measurement system in place that would actually notify us if it was dangerous to our health. Once that became apparent, you know, Island Health worked with all elected officials in the Comox Valley to get a better understanding of this. And at that point, I started discussions with the industry about having an actual wood lot that would properly season and be a source of good wood. And in fact, I believe in 2019 or so, they came and presented to council and said that this is something they would be willing to look forward to. But for those of you who are on council and other elected officials in the Comox Valley, you may be aware that we get a lot of emails about wood stoves. And if you go to the Save Our Wood Stoves website that is run by the industry, they still list us, all our contact information, so people can let us know about the wood stoves. And I think, unfortunately, it's a bit misleading, as has been reiterated time and time again at this table. It's not that we're against wood stoves; it's the outcome of burning poor wood and the actual PM2 levels that become dangerous to the people who live in our community. And I think one of the challenges, and Ms. Tazzioli referenced it when she was talking, was the fact that, you know, when the actual testing of wood stoves was audited by and I can't remember the exact name, but the Northeastern States joint group found that they just weren't being held to the highest standards that they said they were. And so it's certainly still a massive challenge, but I think there is a solution there, but I haven't heard of any movement since the groups came and talked to us. In fact, the only thing I've noticed is the amount of emails I get has gone up, but I haven't actually noticed whether or not the wood stove industry has been moving forward on those woodlot things. And Ms. Tazzioli, I'm not sure if you were around during those meetings or recall any of those conversations, but are you aware of anything that's happened in that realm?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to provide an update. I know that there was some public interest in creating the woodlots. However, that is not the most effective way to reduce wood smoke. And so I think that it could be one solution, especially when wood stoves are used as a secondary source of heating. So in the case of power outages or emergency situations, I think it's great for people to be prepared. but on a daily basis, using a different source of heat will provide the most reductions in particulate matter.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Well, I think we've had a fairly lengthy discussion here. We have a motion on the floor. And so are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. And we're just at about 10 after 6. I'm going to look and get a bit of a poll on whether or not council members want to take a meal break and comfort break. Is that? And we'll come back maybe approximately 6:30. That sound fair? All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue on with our meeting, and next thing on the agenda is item 8.1, the situation tables and feedback summary.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Thanks. Mr. Rushton just has a little overview of the information sheet that's on the agenda tonight.
Hi, everyone. Thanks through the CAO to Mayor and Council. I'll just briefly recap the information sheet provided and add a few more details. So as you'll recall, in April, City Council received a presentation from the Ministry of Public Health and Solicitor General regarding the establishment of situation tables in Comox Valley. Situation tables are weekly or bi-weekly meetings between frontline workers from various sectors and agencies to share information on clients facing elevated risks and coordinate immediate interventions. Some of the impacts reported: improved collaboration, improved service delivery, ability to identify systemic barriers, reduced demand for emergency and police services, reduced risk of criminal offending and victimization, awareness of complex community challenges and shared responsibilities. So as a result of that presentation, City Council had tasked us to go out and do some community engagement with the relevant organizations to ask the following questions: their current level of collaboration working with other organizations that might be similar to this process, their views on the usefulness of initiating a situation table in our community, and whether or not they may have the resource capacity to facilitate the situation tables. So also of note, at the meeting, several city councilors expressed concern over the lack of funding provided to administer or coordinate the situation tables, and also the current limited capacity of city staff to undertake this role. So the community engagement, we reached out to 34 organizations contacted through email. 12 organizations responded. Of note, and looking through the list here, some responded through a collective response. For instance, if they were part of a larger organization or a larger collective, like the Coalition to End Homelessness, they would have responded through that means as well. The feedback received from the majority of respondents and organizations was positive and in support of situation tables. Similar type meetings already exist in the Comox Valley in many organizations. That was also noted, and resource capacity and experience were identified as limiting factors. So some of the agencies that responded to current level of collaboration working with people experiencing difficulties that might be similar to this process, the CBTS, the Community Action Team, Coalition to End Homelessness, all had responses, as did the John Howard Society of North Island and the Community Justice Center in Courtenay. Since the submission of this report, we did have an opportunity to check in with Inspector Curvers, and the RCMP is also interested in participating, however, would not have the capacity to lead a table. Agencies' view on the usefulness of initiating situation tables, the overall response was positive. One organization did express some concerns, but for the most part, there was a positive response for organizations. Does your agency have the resource capacity to facilitate the situation table process? There wasn't a lot of organizations that stepped forward that said they could. There was a couple. One of them, however, would need some type of funding for staffing. There is one organization that still might be interested and might have the capacity. Through our discussion with the BC Office of Crime and Reduction in Gang Outreach, they provided examples of who's leading in other jurisdictions. So it's a pretty big range. RCMP leads in some. John Howard was mentioned to lead in some too, and municipal bylaw was also leading in some jurisdictions too. We also explored Campbell River's response and activation to situation tables. And the Campbell River coordinator informed me that the commitment would likely be about 10 hours a week for the first 3 or 4 months to establish a situation table, and then 1 or 2 hours a week to maintain the situation table thereafter. Also of note, the Campbell River coordinator was very willing to assist if Comox Valley identified a lead in the coordination of a situation table, and was very gracious in the information they shared. Of note too, we've been back in touch with Ali Bawa from the DC Office of Crime Reduction and Gang Outreach. And just confirmed that there is some flexibility in who can apply for the funding. However, the majority of models have been through a municipal host, and they would hold the funding and then potentially work with another agency. And just as a reminder, the funding is only for training and equipment, such as a laptop, to help as a resource. So that's all the information we were able to get at this point in time. So I'll take any questions or direction from council based on that.
Excellent. Thanks very much for the report. Sound a little echoey there, but with that, I do have a question or comment from Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. So it sounds like most organizations were in favor, but also there is some coordination already happening. Was there any kind of specifics around, I guess I'm just wondering if there's a duplication with some of the things that are already being done. I mean, Inspector Curvers talked to us tonight about how, you know, they've identified individuals that have been, you know, kind of higher profile in the community, and seems like they have a bit of a team approach already. So I guess I'm just wondering if anybody shared, you know, what they're already doing and whether, you know, what this would maybe add to what they're already doing. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Morin. So the information we have, again, CVTS reports working with a large capacity of many community partners and collaborating. The community action team communicated that they work with a diverse range of community stakeholders, including health professionals, elected officials, emergency responders, First Nations Health Authority, Island Health, Division of Family Practice, community-based service organizations, outreach and harm reduction workers, people with lived experience, and Coalition to End Homelessness hold meetings with people with lived experience of homelessness weekly. Additionally, they hold homeless response meetings with those in the front line bi-weekly. And the meetings can include RCMP, Island Health, outreach, and other stakeholders. So you're right that the meetings are taking place. However, when we ask the direct question, the only organization that basically had reservations around doing it was Dawn to Dawn Action on Homelessness Society. Felt there was enough representation and that there were similar processes already existing in the valley. So they were the only ones that really identified that they felt there was it was already being taken and there wasn't duplication.
Yep. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Thanks very much for that. And we have Councillor Healing.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Craig, for the work involved. There's an item in the third sentence of the next steps in your briefing note indicating that your department could engage with these agencies and the Office of Crime Reduction in regards to funding and training opportunities and report back to council. Now, you didn't make that a recommendation, but if we put that forward as a motion, does that make sense as a next step? I mean, it doesn't sound to me like you're suggesting we just drop this. I'm mindful that it's something that's been recommended by our MLA and you've gotten a generally positive response, which makes sense to me because agencies that are involved in collaboration always see more opportunities for collaboration as a positive thing.
Yes, thanks for the observation, and I would concur, Doug, Councillor Helgen, that there seems to be a lot of people interested in this right now. Not a lot of people willing to take that lead. However, there is an agency that has expressed they might have that capacity. So I think it would be a good idea for us to work with that organization to see if there's possibility around that, and then also work with them if there's a requirement around the funding piece to host funding to support.
Thanks. I just want to make sure that we're not kind of through the side door getting you stuck with all the work that's involved in this.
And Mr. Garbage, just wanted to make a comment.
If I may, through the mayor, thank you, Councillor Helene, for the second part of your comment that you just made. I do acknowledge that we have a strategic priority action item, and we were to be kind of looking at our role in social service sector issues that we had to sideline for 2022 because of the Strengthening Communities grant. And so in my understanding through Mr. Rushton is that, again, this is just some exploratory discussions that we can facilitate. If it turns out that we play a role, then we would certainly come back to council for some direction on that. I do, it was very interesting to see the feedback, particularly from, the groups that have been part of some of the integration that's been happening, and I think it's worthwhile time. And we will no doubt we will definitely be coming back to council if it does end up being a resource draw or proposal, for your consideration.
So based on that, do you need a motion, or is it are you suggesting that staff will go ahead and do some further exploratory talks as it is?
I think it would be great to have a motion in that regard, because this is as a result of input from our MLA, and we can add it to the management report, and just so we are tracking these things. I think it's important to understand.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion if you want to dispense with receipt.
I'll assume receipt is 100% unanimous. We do have a question, but okay, the floor is yours, Councillor Helene.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move that staff engage with the community agencies noted and the BC Office of Crime Reduction and Gang Outreach in regards to funding and training opportunities for situation tables, and report back to council. And just for staff trying to capture that, it's basically the last sentence of the next steps with a few modifications.
All right, and I've got some thumbs up. It's been seconded by Councillor Frisch. So yeah, that sounds like good next steps. And one of the things that the MLA did mention is this was a system that was being used up in a community north, Terrace. I did reach out to the mayor up there as well, just to get a sense of how well it's been received up there. And their biggest challenge, of course, was just the way that COVID has impacted things. But she did have some positive things to say, and sort of that hope that things, as they return to normal, will move forward. So, yeah. With that being said, we have a motion on the floor. No further questions or comments. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Excellent. Next on the agenda is the 5th Street Bridge Rehabilitation Project closeout. All right, pass it back over to staff. Mr. Garbett.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, we had originally proposed a presentation on this. Our project manager, Adam Pitcher, is just going to give a couple of key points from the staff report and is available for questions.
To the CAO and to Mayor and Council, the purpose of this briefing note is to provide a closeout summary, including a summary of the schedule impacts the project faced, as well as the finalized cost for the project. As noted in the report, the costs for the project were approximately $6.99 million. Due to the challenges the project faced in project scope, single lane alternating traffic was extended by 4 months. The report also summarizes our communications efforts throughout the project that we're quite proud of. As noted in the report, single lane alternating traffic was used throughout the project to maintain traffic flows at all times across the bridge. And although there were project delays, the traffic flows throughout the area continued to flow, which was considered a success. With that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments you might have.
Thanks very much. I don't see any questions or comments just yet, but I just want to obviously say thanks to staff for being on top of all this stuff and for the report. Actually, while I just ended up north in Terrace, where they have a very similar bridge, and they have estimated that their bridge repair time will be more like about 1.5 years. So it's a bit of a longer bridge, but it's also only a single lane bridge. But I think that other municipalities are kind of looking at what delays can be impacted through COVID, et cetera. So that being said, there's a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes. And moving along, solid waste automated curbside collection award contract. Mr. Garbett.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to deliver this contract award brief. Mr. Shaw is taking a well-deserved vacation. So Council may recall that we discussed this and we have a direction to bring forward a future report at an open council meeting regarding the city's implementation plan to transition from bi-weekly garbage collection, and that council rising report at a future council meeting that Halton Recycling Limited, Mterra Environmental has been awarded a 10-year contract commencing on January 1st, 2024 to provide the city with 3-stream automated curbside collection, and that with the provision of a 5-year extension. The briefing note information sheet provides an overview of the contract terms, and we're just providing this for council's consumption.
Thanks very much. Any questions or comments? Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight in the report that with this proposal that there will be some additional clauses in the contract that deal with maybe damages due to missed deliveries and that kind of thing. So that hopefully will bring some. I know that we've our collection issues have settled down a lot over the last few months, but this should remedy that for future, hopefully. So I don't know if staff wanted to comment on that at all, but there are some additional there's some additional language in there that covers off some of those things that we've had some issues with in the past.
All right, Mr. Garbett.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question, Councillor Moran, and through to council. We had a very long relationship with Mterra under the previous contract. It was extended a number of times, and really the challenges we had were fairly recent, near the end of that contract. And as with any procurement, the new contract we have terms for performance that are quite robust and reflect industry standards. And so we don't anticipate, it is a completely different type of service now, much less dependent on manual labor, I guess would be the right term, with the automated collection. But we are cognizant of that, and we need to make sure that our partners in these projects are accountable. Really comfortable with where we landed, and it's although it's not a single contract, we are working with Comox in coordination, which assisted us, and it's optional for Cumberland and solid waste services provided by the regional district to participate if there's an opportunity in the future. Excuse me.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And I don't see any other questions or comments, and do just want to comment myself just that it is exciting to see our solid waste modernizing. And it was a surprise to me, actually, that my kids found it exciting as well, as we were driving through the province last week, and they were able to see garbage bins, and they're like, why do they look different? Why do they have handles that can be picked up? And we talked about RFID. So that whole modernizing of our solid waste pickup is, I think, really critical, and not just the equipment, but also the contract, which I really appreciate the question, Councillor Moran. With that, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. And next thing, we have the interim organic collection service. All right, Mr. Garbett.
Thank you again, Council. And just this information sheet is coming back from our in-camera options. We're very excited that in an interim solution, we're going to be able to enter into an agreement with Mterra to provide organics and yard waste in a combination inside the community. We have direction from council to come back at a future date with a open report regarding the city's implementation plan to transition from our current unlimited yard waste to commingled curbside organics, and the limitation that we had to deal with on the Mterra side is 360 liters per week per residential unit. We do acknowledge that right now that we have unlimited yard waste. There is a large number of properties, because we love our gardens in Courtenay and they're beautiful, beautiful properties, that we need to establish an approach on an interim basis to deal with this issue. We'll do that through some engagement with the community. It's an interim step because as we move to the automated service, there are going to be limitations on that yard waste. We're going to work with partners in the community, talk to the regional district and look at what our yard waste options, because we really do not want to see this yard waste enter into the waste stream with its related environmental implications in the landfill. We really appreciate council's support on this. It's a really important step to get into the organic side of the equation, and our partner municipalities in Comox and Cumberland have been doing this combined a pilot on organics, excuse me, and yard waste. Comox is going to be in a similar situation with as they transition into the automated collection with a plan on yard waste, and we'll certainly work together on that. That's just an update for council's information.
Excellent, thanks very much. And first up, we have Councillor Killian.
Thanks, Mayor. Does staff have any clarity on what the interim step will actually look like? It seems like we've got about a year between when our new collection system takes effect and when organics pickup has already been implemented. Do we know what sort of receptacles are going to be used for that commingled yard waste and organics during that 1 year? Because I'm assuming that the contract includes the specifically designed receptacles, and presumably they won't be available until the contract takes effect.
Perfect. Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian. Yeah, we're in the process of dealing with that right now. There weren't receptacles provided in the Comox context, and so there are options out there, and we'll look to develop some. Well, I guess I would say right at this point, we haven't really quite determined on how exactly that's going to be, because it's commingled. You can obviously use the same receptacle, but organics sometimes has some different aspects as it relates to the materials that are from organics waste from a household. We will come back with a report on that, and we are looking at options. Right now, the community is pretty engaged, and we have a lot of support for addressing this waste stream issue. And we do have some information from our neighbors to the south in the RDN and the city of Nanaimo that did roll out this there. We'll certainly build on their learnings and the information that our Cumberland and Comox use at this point right now. So not a direct or clear answer to your question, but it is under development, and we will brief council on those options as they come together.
Great, thanks very much.
Thanks for that. And I don't see any further questions or comments, but just really want to thank staff. I mean, this is a long time coming. I know, we originally passed at the regional district about 3 years ago, and really excited to see this happening, given the fact that organics through the methane gas is, orders of magnitude worse as a greenhouse gas compared to CO2 and other things. So really happy to see this moving forward. With that, all those in favor of receipt? And that's unanimous. Perfect. Now we get to council reports, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton. Excellent. Councillor Frisch.
Just quickly, Mayor, I wanted to let council know that we've managed to secure a little bit of funding for our barbecue with the Junction community. And so we will be hosting that sometime in the late afternoon on August 17th. It's a Wednesday. And I'll have to get back to you at the time. We have a meeting this week, and also all of council, of course, and anyone who's interested in that community is invited to come. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Fritsch. Appreciate that. Councillor Hillian.
I'll pass, Mayor. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor McCollum. Okay, Councillor Moran. Councillor Moore.
The mayor did have me quite busy as acting mayor over the last month, so I'll just report on a couple things. Well, this was not acting mayor, but I went to the McPhee Meadows open house via Zoom, which I'm sure we're going to hear about, but that was great. Very engaged neighborhood residents down there. So I thought that was really positive, exciting times with McPhee Meadows. And then just the one other thing was, as acting mayor, I attended the mayor's meeting, mayors across the province with Bill Blair, the federal minister for emergency preparedness, in a Zoom meeting, and basically just looking at, the sort of doing a postmortem on the impact on emergency services over the last few years, with everything from COVID to wildfires to flooding to atmospheric rivers and everything in between. And it was interesting to hear from folks across the province, and a lot of really great ideas in terms of what we can hopefully do to mitigate some of that. And hopefully Minister Blair takes all those suggestions and acts on some of them. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Councillor Moore and Councillor Theos. Excellent. And I've only got a couple of things as I was away. But I did briefly stop by the Family Services open house in AGM. Unfortunately, I was only able to attend for a few minutes as I had to be elsewhere. But again, a great service within our community, and just want to make sure give them the best support that we can. Also, we had a meeting with the MLA just last week that I got back just in time for, and it was great again to work with the MLA and let her know about the issues that are challenging in our community. And last Thursday we had yet another Ukrainian support meeting that we've been having for the last couple of months. And a great meeting. Thanks to North Island College for providing a space for us to meet, although they keep having me run the meetings, but everyone seems to be having a good time, and great and very inspiring to see all the community workers come together, whether it be church groups, Rotary clubs, the Immigrant Welcome Center, United Way, and just everyday volunteers and stuff, seeing what they can do for the Ukrainians. And one of the things that came out of that meeting, the Chamber of Commerce also is part of those meetings, as employment is one of the biggest concerns that folks have. And just want to give them a bit of a plug. On Wednesday, they're going to be having a Developing an Inclusive Culture in the Workplace workshop. So head on over to the Chamber website if you're interested in attending, and you can buy your tickets there. And with that, we'll move into council resolutions. Councillor Moran.
I've got a lot of airtime tonight, apparently. I would like to move this item, solid waste collection services. Whereas at the November 29th, 2021 council meeting, council directed staff to provide notification of the discontinuation of solid waste collection services as of October 31st, 2022 to all multi-residential apartment and condo complexes only, and institutional, commercial, and industrial customers. And whereas with notice having been provided, concerns have been raised by residents in the MU4 zone regarding the discontinuation of solid waste collection services. Therefore, be it resolved that council directs staff to bring back a report outlining the impact of the discontinuation of solid waste collection services on MU4 zones. And I can just speak briefly, and then maybe staff might want to just weigh in a bit. So this is a neighborhood that has a blend of commercial and residential buildings. And so there are only two. It's a very unique, staff can speak to this further, but it's very unique zoning. And so the residents would have been notified. Well, everyone in that neighborhood has been notified that the waste collection is going to discontinue, except for two buildings in the neighborhood that have that are fully designated residential. And so it's created a lot of concerns because there are, a number of residents there who would normally fall under that residential collection and are now, have received notification that they won't have collections. So I don't know if staff wants to just briefly say anything that maybe I've missed, and what this report is that I'm requesting come back is going to be about. Thanks.
Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Thanks for raising this, Councillor Morin. Staff have had some discussions. We have a number of zones that mix commercial, industrial, and residential together. Tin Town is a very unique development in itself, and longstanding, one of the first in British Columbia actually to have that configuration of land uses that some see as not compatible, but has been very, very successful and known throughout the province. So we'll certainly bring back a report that highlights some of the similarities and issues related to this zone itself. We do have a fairly large number of zones that the land form or the concept of Tin Town is quite unique. However, the integration of residential and commercial and residential and industrial stretches through a number of zones within our zoning bylaw. We will come back quite quickly with the staff report. I know that Public Works Services has already started the work.
All right, thanks for that. I don't see any further questions or comments. So all those in favor, any opposed, and that passes unanimously. And 10.2, Councillor McCollum.
Is this a motion or is it a rise and report?
It's a rise and report. And this is the new business that when we started the meeting at 4 o'clock, I sort of mentioned we'd be doing this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. So I'm not moving it. I'm just reporting that in accordance with section 146 and 148 of the community charter. This is Adriana Proton, Manager of Legislative Services, be appointed as corporate officer for the city of Courtenay.
Congratulations. It's official. Awesome. Thanks so much for doing that, Councillor McCollum. And with that, we can move into bylaws. Councillor Frisch.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that council adopt zoning amendment bylaw number 3044 2022, which is for 1915 Cumberland Road.
All right. And any questions or comments? Oh, I'm gonna give it to Mr. Marshall.
If there's any questions, just very briefly, this particular development, 20 lot subdivision on Cumberland Road, there was a covenant that has covered a lot of the issues that council was looking for, including $100,000 towards affordable housing, sewer main through the site, as well as improvements to Cumberland Road. So the long and short of it is they have met all the conditions that we asked for with this rezoning, and that they have signed the covenant and that's ready to be registered. So we're good to go.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. And Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. So I happen to live in this neighborhood, so I often get feedback, and I just wanted to share with everyone and anyone who listens that there are some people in the community that are a little concerned with how much activity there'll be during construction. And I think it's going to be okay. It's a very quiet neighborhood. There's very little traffic in the neighborhood, but if things do pick up and become a problem, then we might have to bring something back to council to consider some sort of just traffic calming situation if there's, lots of traffic for some reason with contractors. But I just wanted to share that with council.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. Mr. Garvin.
Yeah, thank you. Through the permitting process, they'll develop a construction environmental monitoring plan, including traffic management. So we do know that a number of neighborhoods, when there's construction happening, we tend to get lots of phone calls about a number of things, including dust, noise, and traffic, dirty roads, et cetera. And we have standards that they'll need to follow in that regard.
All right, and Councillor Moran.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm just really happy to see this this development coming forward. And of course, I mentioned last time I was thrilled about the planned orchard. And I also wanted to mention I was at Oceanfront Village, the opening for hospice, and they have fruit trees growing, many fruit trees down there. And I'm just thrilled to see these developments planting fruit trees. So that's all I wanted to say. I just always have to, push the food security and fruit tree agenda. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Appreciate that. And I don't see any further questions or comments. So with that, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Excellent. Next, we have Community Plan Bylaw 3070, 2022. And that is Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I would like to move that based on the July 25th, 2022 staff report, official community plan bylaw number 3070 adoption, council approve option 1 and adopt official community plan number 3070 2022.
Excellent. It's been moved and seconded. And Mr. Garbutt.
Well, thank you through the mayor to council. The staff report provides an overview of 4 issue areas that we identified through the referral. I'm really proud to say that we've come forward with a huge amount of work over a 3-year or so period. Staff have done an amazing job. We have had a really effective working advisory group. There was a significant community engagement, and yeah, we had a pandemic in the middle of it and had to completely pivot our engagement as a result. And so I'm really impressed with the work that was done through the Development Services Department and the Long Range Department. Now, Mr. Seta is no longer with us, but Ms. Goddard had led that as the lead planner. And I just really want to echo a lot of the compliment that has come through the community on that project. So I don't know if we're going to give a very short introduction to the report or just respond to if there's any questions. I think a lot of the talk has happened already. So if council has anything they would like to ask, but we're really looking forward to the adoption and the community benefits that are going to flow both to our general public and the development that we see happening quite rapidly. And an example of that is later on this agenda.
So thanks very much. And Councillor Hillian, you're up next.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm wondering if staff could clarify the little bit of confusion that came up around council's ability to engage with comments from community members. We understand that we can't receive any new information after there's been a public hearing, but I'm not sure if we're 100% clear on where third reading and final adoption fit into that. So is it? I'm just wondering if staff could clarify that aspect, please.
Mr. Garbutt.
So I'm not, maybe I'm not following you exactly, Councillor Hillian, but following the public hearing, you cannot receive any other additional information from the public that would affect your deliberations and final decisions on the bylaw adoption itself. So that extends following the public hearing, third reading and fourth reading. Sometimes you do third and fourth reading for bylaws, but that's the general principle.
Okay, so with final adoption tonight, which is my understanding of what we're doing, we're now free once again to engage with anyone who has comments related to this.
After adoption, yes.
Yeah.
You can say yes.
Very much.
Yes, you can. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks for the question, Councillor Hillian. Next, we have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, no question here, just we're, as our CAO said, we're at the end of a very long journey here. And I just wanted to say, this has been a long journey, but it's also, it's the first step, and our staff done amazing work putting together this plan under remarkably challenging conditions, and I just want to thank them for that, particularly Nancy Gothard, our manager of community planning, for everything that she's put into this over the course of time. And I just know that the hard work is coming up as we put this into action, as we actually begin to implement it. I think it actually says in the OCP that the hard part is getting the work done, and that's always the case. And I just know that we're going to get great support from planning as we move forward, and I look forward to the work that this council and the next council, whoever they are, get to do, and with the full support of the team that put this remarkable plan together. So just delighted to be at the end of this long process and have such a strong plan for our future. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton and Councillor Theos.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot of work that went into this and into this guiding map of what the community will look like moving forward. And that's to be commended. There was a significant amount of public consultation, and you know, I mean, when people that are very engaged in how the community is going to move forward, when they bring forward their comments and questions and concerns, it is critical that we respond appropriately to those concerns and questions and comments when addressed. And there was you know, one person that was bringing up comments that I'm not sure if we've actually answered adequately or even can answer, but I would just want to highlight a few of the things that were brought forward and see if we can get some answers, because I think that it is critical that we do have these answers moving forward. And I think to sum up the questions again, like that this person was asking, I believe, were fair questions. And I think the questions were in regards to how is the document for our OCP going to improve small business and you know, and see how our small business community is going to succeed with this document. The other questions that I felt were fair were in regards to the cost to the taxpayers and you know, the values that we're putting into this document. Do we like what was just mentioned by Councillor Cole Hamilton, is that now the implementation part starts. Do we have ideas of implementing these values, what kind of cost that will come at for the citizens of our community? And the third, I think, component to this gentleman's questions were it was in regards to how does the OCP that we are presenting right now and voting on right now for adoption, how does that affect the aging population that we have in our community, and how does it address their needs? Thank you very much.
Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions, Councillor Theos. So our third reading report summarized the information that we received, and that was presented to council. They considered that and deliberated over that, and third reading was given to the report. So with respect to small business, the OCP provides opportunity for economic growth and development. With respect to the cost to the taxpayers of this OCP itself, ultimately the development program itself provides a very significant opportunity for development within our boundaries. Development pays its costs through development cost charges and offsite works and services that are required through our development approvals. The longer term costs to say the maintenance of that new infrastructure is part of our asset management program that council has some clear policies on. And then ultimately, with respect to the accommodation of seniors inside the community, one of the biggest aspects of this OCP is it's broadened our perspective onto the social service sector and where we will continue to support or maybe potentially expand city services more likely in partnership. But one of the biggest items that will support our aging community is the opportunity to have a broad range of residential types of units and at varying densities throughout the community. Previously, we had very limited integration of land uses inside the community. We're very strictly single residential, some small multi-residential areas. And I think the biggest innovation of this OCP is the ability within neighborhoods to provide alternate forms that could potentially allow people to either change their form as new younger families in the community, and then as people age through. So that's a fairly common technique. The city, we do have a wide variety of land uses within our total jurisdiction. The census that came out said that basically, I'm paraphrasing, but 50% of our housing stock was single residential housing, but actually meant that 50% isn't. So we have a long history of these varieties, but what the OCP is going to allow is inside areas to have other options closer together. And that's some neighborhood development that can happen. So I think generally through the third reading, we provided feedback to council and we got that direction. But with respect to those kind of three questions you have, I think that's a way to sort of summarize it, recognizing what stage we are in the bylaw process.
Yeah, subsequent.
Yes, please.
Yep. Councillor Theo, so don't turn yourself off this time.
It was fast. Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate the answers, CAO. Those were solid answers. In regards to the seniors, transportation-wise, mobility-wise, where do you see the strengths in the OCP affecting seniors in that regard? Transportation.
Mr. Garvin.
I may defer to my planning colleagues because I don't wear that hat every day anymore. But one of the key components, though, is with that mix of densities and housing types within our area, we also have other policies that look at corridors of development, which will take advantage of our existing transit networks and active transportation linkages. So it provides that common approach to have densification in those corridors, in the Cliff corridor, and then we have town centers within the area that are all serviced by multimodal linkages. I think I might have that quite correct there.
Ms. Butler.
Do you want me to add a bit? Yeah, through the mayor, to council and Councillor Theos. Yeah, with regards to the multimodal in particular, yeah, what CAO Garbett was discussing was this concept of access by proximity. So any resident, regardless of age, by allowing more mixed uses throughout our community in a variety of pockets, then people can get to some commonly, kind of daily destinations by more by walking, maybe transit, and then, I mean, any mode is still available even in our future. So more walking. We did hear from our seniors representative on the advisory committee that more opportunities for walking would be really nice. And then also we know that there's a younger, it was interesting talking about seniors issues. There's quite a bit of stratification within the older population. There's still people with lots of mobility, health, and leisure time. And then, there's, things change as we age. But for those in that kind of earlier seniors, a lot of people did talk about a desire to get out and be walking. Like I mentioned, biking, electric bikes make that a lot easier. So I think we all know the OCP is strongly supports cycling future. And then also at a finer grain, and you would have seen this on the July 11th council agenda, is we're applying for an accessibility audit to our public spaces, including the mobility network. So understanding where there may be physical barriers, could also include cognitive barriers to interacting with those public spaces. So a physical barrier could be like a curb that's just a little bit too high to get a mobility scooter or even, comfortably walk over. So from those scales of land use down to the finer grain of infrastructure, that those age-friendly perspectives were incorporated as much as we could. And there is actually a separate
age-friendly report on the OCP project webpage where more detail of those conversations happen. We talked to a number of service providers, and we actually made phone calls to some older people in our community. And so I hope that answers your question.
Excellent. And I would say, if we look around our community again, the amount of construction going on, especially as our CAO alluded to, does provide that diversity. The quantity of stuff that's being built right now is relatively unprecedented in our community, I would say. And although that won't necessarily affect affordability, I mean, most people agree that that's going to be something that will be addressed through partnerships with the province, the federal government, through some housing strategies, especially non-market housing strategies. The other thing is when, especially particular to seniors, if you look at the new facility that's being built right at the end of the parkway at 29th there. I mean, that is a state-of-the-art facility really to help the seniors in our community stay here and give them a place to age. And so I think one of the terms that was in the OCP was actually that 10-minute or 15-minute community, so that you have that ability to mobilize and get around. Lastly, I'll just mention on economic development, although it's not particularly addressed in a fulsome way necessarily in the OCP. Generally, they're not, but there's a tremendous opportunity as we move forward to look at economic development, which was one of the things that the CAO and myself have been talking about a lot over the last year. However, other things have come up like the MRDT and the Strengthening Communities Grant, which has really sapped a lot of resources. But I would say the opportunity to be able to build an economic development philosophy and program over the next few years from the ground up is again, just amazing. So looking really optimistic towards those things. So hopefully that helps a little bit. And with that being said, Councillor Theos.
Yeah, no, Mayor, I appreciate that comment about the economic development, because of course, I think that in the OCP, that is a big component, because everything we do when we're talking about planning, will affect how our economy does function. And for small businesses, having some types of networks, we just talked about Tin Town, for instance. That was a creative and unique way of creating economic development. And, I think that's what this person was searching for, is what kind of out of the box creative ideas do we have that are going to help small businesses thrive and succeed. And when we're looking at our small businesses, the big businesses can handle it, but the smaller businesses, I think we're at about a 4.50 to 4.5 to 1 ratio for our tax rate for small business compared to residents. I think that's what they were driving at, is how do we find ways of bringing that down and and taking some pressure off them too. So I appreciate your comments, Mayor, because I think that's going to be key for the future. Thanks, Mayor.
Yeah, no problems. And I think, the chamber was definitely involved in the process of the OCP development, and they sort of speak for our business community. And I think, our community, I mean, obviously I'm maybe biased because I really love our community, but we have some amazing service clubs like Rotary, Lions, just to name a couple. But we've also had really cool organizations like Startup Comox Valley, Lift Comox Valley, which really have worked to work with the actual businesses and help them develop. And there's been partnerships with Innovation Island out of Nanaimo, et cetera, which gets government funding. But I think we're well positioned. But with that, Councillor Moore.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. I just think we're maybe venturing into territory, because I didn't hear these specific points brought up at the public hearing. So I think we need to be careful what we're commenting on, because it sounds like new information. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor Moore. And with that, we'll call the question. All those in favor? It looks unanimous. All those opposed? And there are no hands up. Okay. All right. Thanks very much for that. Moving into zoning amendment bylaw. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Nancy. We really appreciate it. All right. With that, zoning amendment bylaw 3071/2022 and Councillor Frisch.
I'll move that council adopt zoning amendment bylaw number 3071/2022, which is the secondary suites bylaw.
And Mr. Garbutt.
The bylaw content remains stable. So if council had any additional questions, but we're ready for adoption.
All right, I see no questions or comments. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passed unanimously. That's awesome. Sorry. Councilor McCollum.
I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw number 3074/2022, bike parking standards bylaw, be passed for final adoption.
Been moved and seconded. Mr. Garbutt, did you want to speak to it? Only because your mic's on.
Just kept it on there. Again, where bylaw is content stable. So if you have any other questions, we're here for adoption.
All right. Any questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? And again, that's unanimous. Great job. And Councillor McCollum.
I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw number 3075/2022, DPA guidelines and TUPs be finally adopted.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Mr. Garbutt, maybe if you want to just say what a DPA and a TUP is, and then we can take the vote.
Yeah, thank you. I actually would I would really like to highlight this is a very important change to add our development permit guidelines and temporary use permits into our rezoning, or sorry, into the zoning bylaw. There's two aspects to it. One, it's a much more fluid and easier to address tool if we need to fine tune or make changes to these DP guidelines. It's not as onerous as a OCP amendment to address them. And it gives us some tools to be making sure we're nimble and all the good words they say in terms of being a good organization. Secondarily, though, it gives us an enforcement tool to move forward. You are not able to ticket on development permit guidelines that are inside the official community plan. You only have a judicial process, which is time consuming and costly. So there's a secondary benefit, but the primary benefit of this approach, and it's new to our organization, is that it gives us that flexibility at the zoning table. So I really appreciate the work that staff has done. I would say that as a monitoring item, we'll certainly look at how the DPs work. This is all delegated to staff, so it provides a good efficiency tool to move things through. This is what the province has been talking about. We've been doing this for quite a long time, that these DPs have been delegated to staff. With that, just probably a little bit more conversation than I thought, but we're ready for adoption.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Any questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? And again, that is unanimous. And Councillor Cole Hamilton. Oh, yeah. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, I just would like to recuse myself on this item as I have a potential conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. And back to Councillor Cole Hamilton. We'll just play some music.
All right, I will move that based on the July 25th, 2022 staff report, OCP amendment bylaw number 3059 and zoning amendment bylaw number 3051/1790.
Mr. Garbutt, did you want to say something?
Sorry, I was looking to staff for some clarification because the official community plan has been adopted. An OCP amendment is no longer required for this. I'm sorry.
Doesn't it say if the OCP is adopted?
Yeah,
option two.
We have it should say that zoning bylaw amendment only 3051 should be that. The intro under that part is slightly incorrect there.
Okay.
So you're approving option So it's that council, this is the motion here. Just part, yeah, just 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Take 2. All right, let's just pretend that never happened. Just rewind things a little bit.
All right, so I will move the council give first and second reading of zoning amendment bylaw number 3051 to create a new CD3S zone and rezone the subject property to CD3, 35, not 3S. And 2, the council directs staff to schedule and advertise a statutory public hearing with respect to zoning amendment bylaw number 3051 on August 29th, 2022 at 3:15 p.m.
Oh, Councillor Hillian got in there for a second. Very good, very good. Fantastic. Mr. Garbutt.
I think staff can just do a quick overview of this bylaw. I would note this is our first zoning amendment that implements our official community plan, and it leads to infill in a neighborhood that's really positive.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mr. Marshall.
Yeah, thank you through the mayor to council. This is a panhandle form of 2 duplexes, and as and that requires rezoning. It would have required an OCP amendment as well if we hadn't adopted the new OCP. But so we're looking at the rezoning from R2 to CD35. It's a strata development. It's 4 units in 2 duplexes, as I said, in a panhandle style. The project is compatible with surrounding single family and duplexes. The community amenity contributions for the parks and culture is $2,500. The affordable housing is $2,500. The developer will be required to contribute to the 15th Street turnaround prior to building occupancy. The nice thing about this development is it intends to retain many of the mature trees on the site. I can say that it's consistent with the regional growth strategy, ensures a diversity of affordable housing. It's close to existing services and focuses higher density within existing municipal services. So I think it's my recommendation that it get first reading just for the rezoning. Doesn't need the OCP amendment. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. All right, are there any questions or comments? Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks for the report. I don't have any concerns around what's proposed. Looking at the orientation of the development, or the proposed development, looks similar to what is on the adjacent lot, but the building footprint is even smaller than what's next door. So looks like it's in keeping with the area. My question was actually around our tree retention bylaw, and not specifically on how it impacts this development, but just, and it's been years since I've looked at it, but do we consider a retained tree of equal value to a planted tree when we're looking at existing mature trees on a lot versus clearing a lot and putting in the right number of trees to meet the tree retention bylaw? Just
Through the mayor to Councillor McCollum, the tree bylaw is structured around the size of the property, with an acre being a threshold at which different standards apply. So a property under an acre, of which this one is, can meet its tree density target however it likes. There's maximum flexibility. So the mature is on equal footing to a replanted or even cash in lieu, the exception being if it's a tree in an environmentally sensitive area or protected species. And then over an acre, then that's when retention is targeted in the eyes of the bylaw. And if they are healthy, then strong efforts need to be made to retain them.
That's great information. So when we have a redevelopment on an infill lot or something smaller, when they're going out of their way to retain trees, they're doing that by their own accord, not in accordance with what our bylaw requires. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum. And any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that is unanimous. With that being said, oh yeah, we do need to do another in-camera motion here. We thought we might be done. But if we can go back to item 2.
I don't know what you did. If there's just
Yeah, we're just, it's item 2 and just the B one. And I see that Councillor McCollum is ready to go.
Yeah, I'll move that council close the meeting to the public pursuant to the following subsections of the community charter. 91B, personal information about an identifiable individual who is being considered for a municipal award or honor, or who has offered to provide a gift to the municipality on condition of anonymity.
Fantastic. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. And with that, we will be adjourned. Fantastic. Thanks, everybody.